It is your prisonplanet.tv memberships that fund so much of what we do here on this operation. And then we're more than happy for the TV show after it's aired live, then be leaked out onto the web to tens of millions of people. That's our goal. Ladies and gentlemen, we are live. It is Friday, the 5th day already, hard to believe, of April 2013, and we are going to be live here for the next 3 hours. I've got Chuck Baldwin, a former Constitution Party candidate, joining us coming up at the bottom of the next hour to get into the Southern Baptist Convention, the official Vatican newspapers here in the United States, you name it, calling for an abolition of the Second Amendment. Absolutely state-run, government-controlled religious groups in this country. Truly despicable. And if so-called Christians put up with this, next they won't just be saying abortion's good, they'll be saying human sacrifice is good. And I'm not joking when I say that. I see an Associated Press headline, they're restricting the use of the term Islamicist. Can't even call al-Qaeda terrorists now because they're the good guys overthrowing Libya and Syria, and now you can call anybody that wants liberty a right-wing extremist or a constitutionalist and extremist. That's the new bad group officially. And I'm going to be getting more into this case of this family who are our listeners. We've confirmed it in Florida. All over the news, kidnapped children, government extremists, anti-government extremists, kidnapped children. Yes, their own children. They claim they took their children, their two little boys, because they found a small amount of marijuana. The government's going to take your children for a small amount of marijuana, and they hadn't gotten them back over a year later. That is a predatory government that publicly grows the opium and loads it on the C-130s in Afghanistan to fly heroin into America, onto the streets and into your sons' and daughters' veins. This is a totally sickening joke. But again, everybody knows the government deals drugs. They have congressional hearings admitting it. And then they have a public policy poll going, do you believe the conspiracy theory, the government's involved in drugs? I mean, they've busted... I've had Serpico on. He said everyone in the narcotics division of the detectives, everyone but him was dealing drugs. Everyone. And he wouldn't do it, so they shot him in the face. Frank Serpico. I grew up and the police dealt the drugs. And I didn't use them. You know, I tried one or two and hated the way it made me feel. Like, I feel terrible when I'm on this. The next day I feel like I was run over by a truck. No, thank you. And I'd say, what are you doing raiding our party saying you're looking for drugs? You sell drugs. Oh, did I go to jail or did I go to jail? And I mean, I'm just calling all the bull. I'm done. I'm calling it all. I'm done. I mean, I physically didn't even get angry yesterday. I got physically ill yesterday watching all the newscasts, just talking trash about two parents that had the will and the courage to get their kids back from an evil government. I mean, if you saved somebody from a Nazi death camp, you better believe it was on the radio that terrorists had stolen, you know, a prisoner. I mean, if aliens sat down in flying saucers and said, anyone that doesn't help us are terrorists, I guarantee you, your neighbors, if you were against the aliens, would rat you out to them. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. I'd say half the public, if blood-drinking aliens landed and said, give us children to stick a straw in and drink their blood, and we won't kill you, your neighbors would come grab your children and deliver them, bowing to the aliens. Oh, great bobble snap. Here is the child, drink their blood. I mean, I'm serious. I'm serious. These are collaborator enemies And just we need to call them out for what they are, break the trance, and realize we got tyranny running wild, and now it wants to shut down the real media. The latest on North Korea, it's all coming up. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this 5th day of April 2013. It is Friday, and coming up in the second half of the broadcast, Pastor Chuck Baldwin is going to be joining us to discuss all the major denominations, from Catholic to the Southern Baptist Convention, calling for the end of the Second Amendment and basically the end of America. This is the great move ahead of the new global wars they're about to start, the implosion of the world economy and every nationally sovereign state, and the ushering in of the one world government. And the churches all lining up, again, to worship abortion, to worship gun control, to worship the end of marriage, to just worship tyranny, period, and to openly call for world government, as the Vatican is now doing. Here is the CNN headline report. North Korea loads missiles on to launchers. And they're talking about nuclear war by next Wednesday. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, they're talking about nuclear war. We're not talking about nuclear war. The establishment is. 2 medium-range missiles have been loaded onto mobile launchers in North Korea and are ready to be launched, South Korea's semi-official Yonhap news agency reported today, citing military sources in Seoul. By the way, we have a correspondent in Seoul, South Korea, and we're working on that right now. A U.S. official, not a servant, but official with direct knowledge of the information told CNN on Thursday that missiles and launch components have been moved to the east coast of North Korea in the last few days. And again, that would be able to target the west coast of the United States, or be able to obviously hit Japan. That's much closer. In response, South Korea has sent Aegis destroyers equipped with advanced radar systems into both its coast, Yonhap said, citing Navy sources. The apparent deployment comes amid further threatening statements by North Korea and heightening tensions in the region, a situation that does not need to get any hotter, U.S. State Department said. Why did the State Department authorize with the UN then in the mid-90s ABB, the nuclear reactor company, the multinational company, headed by Donald Rumsfeld, to transfer the reactors to him to get the fissile material to make the atomic bomb warheads, the primitive warheads, the 1950s science-level warheads? Why was that done when there were reactors they could have been, quote, given the last time they were holding the world hostage? Oh, you're threatening war with the South with conventional weapons. Here, let us give you reactors to make A-bombs. I guarantee you, when we're in some new giant wars with al-Qaeda that's being given the entire Middle East right now, a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, it will be a conspiracy theory that the West put al-Qaeda in those countries. It'll be, how dare Alex Jones claim al-Qaeda was put in by us? And I'll be like, I have LA Times, Associated Press, Reuters, CFR from 2010, 11, and 12, 13. Here they, shut up, traitor. Shut up, traitor. Yeah, there's London Guardian dealing with the... I was talking about in 2000, him transferring stuff to him. He was doing it in 1995, 96. Anyways, it's just having a memory in a culture of people that don't even know which end is up. It's really weird. I mean, I guess I'm a heretic because I know sodium fluoride in the levels they put it in the water and food are increasing cancer. They admit it. I know they're putting bisphenol A in the plastics, in that type of plastic to reduce fertility. The White House science czar brags about it. John P. Holdren. I mean, I know they're doing all this. I know they're bad. I know they plan to bring in global crises to sell total tyranny and the shutdown of the alternative media as the answer, and the shutdown of the old web with the new controlled internet. It's all being announced. It's all happening. They're going to take your pension funds, all of it. All of it. You can have no independence. All of your pension fund, public or private, will be taken. All of your bank accounts will be taken. And then your life will be taken. How do I know that? That's how tyrannies work. If they can get any of it, they're going to get it all. What did I say 3 weeks ago when the Cyprus thing started? I said, if they can get 10%, people are like, how dare you say that? They're not taking any money. You know, that was the first response. It couldn't be true. I was reporting on foreign press. First few days, you're a liar, Alex. On my own website, Infowars.com, the comments of trolls and spammers. Alex, you're making it up. Okay, they are taking the money, 7.5%. It's not 10%, you dirty liar. Because they were covering articles from days before. It was then 10%, then it was 20, then it was 30, then it was 40, then it was 50, then it was 60, then it was 70, then it was 80, then it was 90, then it was all the money out of your bank account. For many of the people that had accounts, the lowest number was 40% out of your bank account. And now they're saying they're going to take more. And you notice at first they were like, yeah, tough bailout for Cyprus, but it's what it needs. Fox News reporting. You know, I'm Shepard Smith or whatever his name is. That's right. And then a few days later, now they call it a bailout. They don't even say money out of the accounts on CNN, Fox, MSNBC. That's how it works, you see. And now it's a conspiracy theory. They didn't take money out in Cyprus. There's not 2 billion bullets. And, of course, then it turned out that they sold it as we're going to get the rich people's money when it was actually the poor people. Turns out hundreds and hundreds of mega rich that had their money there, all their money was taken out in the weeks and months before. Reuters reported, oh, but I forgot it doesn't exist. I mean, this is the crazy land that we've gotten to. So they're now loading missiles onto the launchers. All embassies told to evacuate staff from North Korea. The British are pulling out. That is the type of information that is unfolding right now. And maybe this is like all the last threats. You know, remember Homeland Security about a month and a half ago? They were talking about cutting Homeland Security's ever-growing budget just to cut the growth of it. Just hundreds of billions of dollars a year conservatively. They said, we're just going to cut a few billion of your growth. And they said, okay, terrorists will hit us. Al-Qaeda, working with the Tea Party, remember that was the headline, is going to hit America. And if anybody could think they'd go, the Tea Party's made up of mainly Islamophobes who gave up all their rights believing they were going to fight Al-Qaeda. Now the government publicly runs Al-Qaeda, so they're flipping it over to the Patriot movement is the terrorist. But they came out and said, well who's going to hit us? Right-wingers working with Al-Qaeda. Haven't you seen all the new dramas on ABC, CBS, and Fox and Spike TV and everywhere else? I mean, on all the shows, the killers are gun owner patriots. Haven't you seen the medical shows? And then the cops are out there, and there's a Tea Party event in Louisiana, and people are visiting from Florida, a husband and wife who are engineers who have 2 little boys, so they raid the rooms of the people because it's an anti-government thing. You're not allowed to have a Tea Party event at the hotel with speakers. You know, good agents, good maids went in and dug through stuff, in the free country and claimed they found less than a gram of marijuana and a pipe. And so the children were taken, thank God, in our free country. If they catch you with marijuana, your children are taken, Air Force veterans, no criminal record. And then a year later, the government has the kids. And then now the parents went and took their kids back. Oh, my gosh, can you imagine? There's only one thing worse than that. One time I went in the garage, and usually if I left the door open and forget to close it at night, raccoons go in to try to find the dog food. And the most evil thing that you've ever seen happens. If there's a mama raccoon or daddy raccoon in the garage, they're not mean about it. They'll just kind of run out. But if they brought their babies in with them and you try to get close, they just get their back against the wall. They won't leave, and they start hissing and growling at you. And if you go up to them, they will attack you and bite you. And I think all raccoons should be executed, hunted down, and put in FEMA camps, because there's nothing worse than wanting your babies to be safe. There's nothing worse than a parent wanting to be with their child. I mean, I think abortion is great in this country. I think it's great we've killed 53 million babies. I think it's great now the Journal of Bioethics is calling to kill babies up to age 3. I think it's great they're calling for death panels of old people. And I think it's great that all over the country, I know people I'll be in a restaurant listening, or I was at Barton Springs once and heard a couple going, it's just terrible. Yeah, I can't believe it. I mean, no criminal record. He's a professor. She's a scientist. She went in to have her second child. They claim they found marijuana in her system. They took both their kids. Yeah, it's been 2 months. They hadn't seen them, and they're ending parental rights. Yeah, it's terrible. And then I'm in a restaurant, and I start talking to the people, or I'm in a restaurant and hear them going, yeah, they pulled him over, and he had some marijuana in the car. Yeah, so they went to the house and took their kids. I mean, folks, this is, the government ships the drugs in. It's trying to put your kids on Ritalin and Prozac-type drugs that are deadly and cause heart palpitations, heart expansion, brain shrinkage, retardation of growth, mental illness. I mean, it's speed. It's hallucinogens. They're putting deadly shots in the kids. Cancer's exploding off the chart. Wood alcohol, aspartame, in all the sugar candies now. You can't even not just find gum, but it's now going in milk, unlabeled, aspartame, wood alcohol. It breaks down to wood alcohol at 87 degrees. The body's 98 plus. I mean, they're just murdering a ship. But let them find you with marijuana. That's why they want to act like marijuana is legalized, so you go and get it so they can take your kids. Marijuana is more illegal now than it's ever been. Do not smoke it. And hate the government, hate the system, spit at them spiritually. Just, we are under enemy bombardment and total attack, and only a pure break with them will defeat them. By the way, look at this article from WorldNet Daily. We've got it linked up on Infowars.com as well. Look what's posted on Piers Morgan's lawn. The last time we had the Veritas Project on, they're the folks that brought down Acre, and they told me off air they were going to go to his house. Pure genius, real reporting. Look what's posted on Piers Morgan's lawn. Sting video snags CNN advocate on grabbing guns. He has an armed response security system. So he has armed guards, ladies and gentlemen. That's a very expensive security to have. We've actually looked at it for our office, but why not just have us armed? Basically retired police generally, or military with special permits for armed response for L.A. They show up to his house, armed response. Piers Morgan, the resident gun control advocate of CNN, protects his own personal property with signs warning that it is guaranteed by an armed response security services, according to a new investigation by self-described guerrilla journalist James O'Keefe of the Project Veritas. It's known for his undercover video operations. He recently exposed how journalists with the newspaper that revealed the addresses of gun permit holders in the New York City were unwilling to take a dose of their own medicine to declare their homes gun-free zones. I'm telling you, these guys are the model of journalism. It's funny. I was talking to him off air about some stuff, and I said, yeah, you ought to go out and show Piers Morgan's bodyguards. And they said, actually, we're on that. We're going there next week, but don't tell anybody. It's just like, bam. And I'll be honest with you. I've actually got reporters going out to L.A. They've scooped us. I'm more than happy. We got guys going in. Well, I'm not going to say when. And that's on their list, is to... but I got to love it, man. You got to love it. You got to absolutely love it. I mean, that's how you deal with these hypocrites. And that's why they're so upset about the alternative media. In fact, Fox News is asking, is Drudge on the White House enemies list? And, of course, the answer is yes. It came out, 3 years ago in the news that I'm on the enemies list, Drudge is on the enemies list. Oh, Breitbart's on there, but you can scratch him off. Guess they got him. I'm sure they just announced how he died 45 minutes after he was at the hospital. That's just a telltale sign when they tell you that there's no foul play immediately, that you've got some really suspicious stuff going on. But again, here's the good news in all of this. They wouldn't be freaking out. They wouldn't be coming after us with all their government-controlled organs like Media Matters, ADL, Southern Poverty Law Center, MSNBC, CNN. They wouldn't be demonizing Infowars.com if we weren't effective. So there's the good news. My grandpa was in the Army Air Corps. They had an old saying, He was flying out of North Africa into Italy, and then after they took over Italy, he was on the ground there. But the point is, did his 22 missions, was that they had an old saying, how do you know when you're over the target? It's when you're getting the flak. Because they put the flak around the factories and around the military bases. They put the big anti-aircraft guns, and then they're shrapnel. They're like shells that go up and explode, and they've got a bunch of pieces falling at hundreds of miles an hour through the air, meant to knock out your windshields, go through your engines. And so how did you know where to bomb? Where you saw the flak coming up. You had to fly into the cloud of flak. And so where do you see the flak going up? Where do you see the flak coming in? The only real media in this country. Does that mean I'm perfect? No. Does it mean these other sites are perfect, like drudgereport.com? No. But you better believe, and you better thank your lucky stars that Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com and Infowars Nightly News and this syndicated radio show and our AM and FM affiliates are out there, because the show's growing. But all the time, we'll be #1 rated in the city or #2 rated in the city. And they'll switch formats. Big money comes in and says, we'll pay you triple what you're making to put ESPN on and get rid of Alex Jones and this talk radio lineup in Orlando. They'll come in and they'll say, you know what, money on the table. Take Alex Jones off in Dallas. Just getting listeners isn't all it takes, ladies and gentlemen. I've gone uphill battle for almost 18 years. I don't know, 1995, how many years is that? It's not quite 18, it's almost 18. For 18 years, ladies and gentlemen, just to get the platform we've got, and we've got the White House breathing down our neck. And if they could get local police to be corrupt and set us up, they would. I wouldn't last living in New York, guaranteed. I wouldn't last living in L.A., folks. Okay? I've even moved to a town outside Austin because I know what I'm doing. But the whole point here is, ladies and gentlemen, that understand, we're going in against the Death Star here in X-Wings. I mean, I hope you realize what you're watching here, because there's not much opposition to this. We'll be right back. Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. until 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, we are here live. Back Sundays, and I will be live this Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. Central with the Sunday broadcast. Tonight's Infowars Nightly News is going to have a bunch of breaking news and special reports we're working on. If you're not a subscriber to PrisonPlanet.tv, we have it at cost. All my films, my book, Paul Watson's book, special reports, live event video feed coverage, the nightly news 5 nights a week, the video streams 6 nights a week. I mean, it is all there. PrisonPlanet.tv. You create one master username passcode. You can share it with up to 11 other people, and that's simultaneously logged in. It's Operation Awakening the Sleeping Giant. Get a PrisonPlanet.tv membership today and support the real media. There's not a lot of real opposition to the globalist and the crime syndicate. But the opposition that's there, Infowars.com, PrisonPlanet.com, WorldNetDaily.com, DrudgeReport.com, we are all on the White House enemies list. That came out years ago. They are freaking out. It's coming out on C-SPAN that they're tracking what we're doing. They're upset about what's going on. They're saying the news on Drudge is causing us problems because they cannot control the narrative anymore. They say there are not 2 billion bullets. There's no armored vehicles. There's no move towards a police state. Fast and Furious didn't happen. We keep reporting it, and then they have to admit it was a false flag. It's all coming out. They have to have their takeover in a vacuum where there's no resistance. We're resisting. We have the truth. They're losing credibility. MSNBC's top shows, 1 million viewers. CNN's top shows, 500 to 600,000 viewers. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 3 million listeners a day. I'm not bragging. I'm saying I'm in danger. You're in danger. We're all in danger if we don't take action, because we're actually having an effect on these people. History isn't just evil. History has multifacets. Those that aren't informed, those that are informed, the mercenaries, the truly evil, the truly virtuous. There's a lot of different factions out there, and there are different currents in this universe. You need to stand up for liberty, and evil will vanish like tyrants at daybreak, like mist, like phantoms at daybreak, to quote Thomas Jefferson. Now, We've got purges against gun owners and veterans who've had their arms and legs blown off or having their kids taken, veterans that are caught with even half a marijuana cigarette or having their children taken, veterans are having their guns taken en masse. There is a domestic purge, like Nazi Germany started with groups that were unpopular at first and expanded onto everyone. I've studied tyranny. It's happening next hour. I'm going to get into that. But a big surprise. He's a smart guy. He knows he's monitored, so he was smart to get out of the country and then contact us. He said, I'm going to have a surprise for you next week. I'm an expert on Korea, and I knew he was. He helped write Tom Clancy's books, co-authored them, has had a lot of his books turned into major hit motion pictures. Has multiple degrees from MIT and Harvard. I don't have his bio here in front of me today, and did write the book on modern psychological warfare that was for the State Department that was picked up by the CIA and others. He's negotiated major hostage rescue operations. He's run PSYOPs. He's brought down foreign governments. That's all on record. He won't brag about it, but you can Google Dr. Steve Pieczenik and find news articles about him. And no one's seen what he looks like in about 20 years either, but we got a photo from him about 30 years ago. And, of course, he is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations as well. But as he says, a mole in there against the globalist. He exposes that bin Laden was already dead, other false flags. And we get his email. We called the hotel. Now he's out on the DMZ. Dr. Steve Pieczenik is there with a sandstorm coming in out of the desert on the DMZ. He's watching troops coming in right now. And he can give you what he believes is the inside intel scoop from his contacts on what's really happening with the biggest crisis, the biggest saber rattling in the 60-year conflict and ongoing conflict that is the North-South Korea proxy situation. So I'm going to give him the floor now, joining us from somewhere in South Korea, right on the DMZ. He is there. Dr. Pieczenik, thank you for going there and reporting for us.
Well, thank you, Alex, and thank you, America, for listening to me. What happened on last week's show, I was on Monday, and we talked about stand-downs and all the other false flags. But I didn't want to give you the surprise that I knew the next day I would be headed out on my own money, my own time, without any assistance from anybody, straight into Seoul, Korea, and up to the DMZ. Right now, I'm on the DMZ. It's about 1:40 a.m. in the morning on Saturday, so we're 11 hours ahead. What I see is a huge sandstorm coming in from the Gobi Desert of China, and in a way that really is the metaphor for what's happening in Korea. China is the primary mover of North Korea. China is the responsible agent that creates Kim Jong-il, Kim Il-sung, and Kim Jong-un. The reason I went here was to show to the American public in real time, only through Alex Jones, how distorted our representation is of the media, how inappropriate and how agitation propaganda is being played through CNN, which I woke up to, and it was unbelievable. Wolf Blitzer, Farah Khan, Amanapur, all the people that we talked about who don't know absolutely nothing are being told by our military and our government to create a sense of panic and agitation that there would be a nuclear missile strike somewhere on the Pacific, possibly near Seattle, possibly on the East Coast, but the entire scenario is totally false. Well, I'm here unofficially, but the Korean government has not stopped me because I've worked with them. Let me explain a little bit of my history. It's not just that I wrote about North Korea and I was here, but I was Deputy Assistant Secretary of East Asia, which meant that Korea was under my jurisdiction. And I was the first person to actually work with in the 1980s a man by the name of Chun Doo-won No Tae-woo. Our own government didn't really remember this. And what that meant in simple language was I was able to help the military government of South Korea. That's the present president's lady whose name is Park, whose father was assassinated in a military coup. I was able, with the assistance of the U.S. government, to transform the entire country of South Korea in the 1980s from a military dictatorship to a civilian one. And then eventually we brought in directly Kim Jong-sam and Kim Dae-jung. There's a lot of names here, but those in the world will understand it, and the South Koreans. I'm here in the DMZ zone in an unidentified area. I've been supported by the South Korean informally through my guides and others, but I've had the opportunity and the unique one, and the reason I've done this to really be able to co-opt and to explain to the Americans only through Alex Jones' show, and Alex and I are being paid. This goes back to our friendship and to the belief I have in that he's the only media that I can get the real truth. And as I'm seeing it now, I see brigades, possible brigades, about 5 to 10,000, 15,000 young South Korean soldiers moving in concert with half-tracks and tanks. The tanks are old. They're not modern. I interviewed, even though the military did not want to work with me, I asked for a formal request, although I came in very quickly to the Republic of Korea Army, which I knew very well because I knew all of their generals. So you have to remember, America, that 20 to 30 years ago, South Korea was run by a military dictatorship. The dictatorship was assassinated. I was not involved in it. But what I was involved was transforming the dictatorship into a civilian government. And now the leader of South Korea is a very elegant, very competent woman who is the daughter of the president, of the man who was the leading dictator by the name of Miss Park. She in no way has interfered with my work. I was provided with a guy who speaks English, Russian, Japanese, and is extremely knowledgeable and was head of the major companies here. And I recruited him very quickly. He may be KCIA, he may be not. But we went immediately up to the DMZ zone. I'm near the DMZ zone. I see the half-tracks coming in with tanks. The tanks are very low quality. They're not M1 Abrams. They're very sophisticated one. But most importantly, I want to express the spree, the joy, and kind of the sadness of when you see young men going to war. When I was drafted, I was 24, 25. What Alex was telling you, these young kids have mandatory 2-year service in the Republic of Korea Army, which is a very effective army. In the old days, we had to hold back PLO. PLO meant petroleum, lubricant, and oil because the South Korean army was very effective, and if we didn't hold them back, they would attack across the DMZ. So you have to imagine Korea being split in half with a line of control where on the one side the North Koreans have 2.2 million military soldiers with antiquated equipment and old generals who come out of the communist regime who were trained by Kim Il-sung. Now, Kim Il-sung was the father of North Korea. The reason they say he's crazy or it was inappropriate is wrong. Kim Il-sung was a very famous fighter against the Japanese occupation. And to understand the history of Korea, you have to understand that Korea was slaughtered by Japanese rule over a 35-year period, starting from 1915 to 45, where the Japanese still do not want to apologize to Korea, and where they used the women of Korea, raped them, pillaged them, came and brought them to Japan to service as service women. Japan will not apologize for this, and very few Koreans in South Korea will ever forget what Japan has done, despite the fact that Japan is now doing business.
They created hundreds of thousands of the ghost children. So you've given us background. I know you are a leading Korea Peninsula expert. You were telling me off air this is a giant psyop, multifaceted. Who's behind it? What's the master plan, Dr. Pieczenik?
Here's the major psyops. The major psyops is we have had our army involved in several basically failed wars. We had them invaded into Iraq, as you know, from Bush. We had the invasion of Afghanistan thanks to Obama, and we've had incursions into various Middle East countries. All have failed. We also have to remember that the U.S. Army failed in the war in Korea, and that the only general who brought it forth and made peace on the DMZ was General Eisenhower. So it took a military man to bring peace. What really happened now was I anticipated that because the Navy was not involved in any of the prior incursions in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and only served as a deterrent in the Mediterranean and in the basically the oil companies denying any access to so-called terrorists, which really weren't there. They immediately switched to Asia as we began to get involved with Asian denial of access in the Straits of Malacca and instigated the Japanese militaristic empire. And at the same time, we were forced forcing the Chinese in our confrontation to force the North Koreans. So it's a kind of kabuki of concentrated efforts on the part of the United States, North Korea, South Korea, and China, which I have seen for over 35 years. What happens usually is that the leader of North Korea, at the instigation of China, because of our relationships that become poor, as our relationship with China becomes poor, China starts to act out and then informs North Korea to do something that seems silly or very dangerous or self-destructive. In the meantime, we know very well everything about Kim Jong-un, the new leader. He's been in Switzerland for 15 years. He was a very poor student, extremely shy, very loved basketball, but in fact was never trained to either be a leader of the Communist Party or, as they call him, the commissioner or the master planner and master soldier of the DPRK, or the Korean Army. So I knew that basically we had a phantom army, we had a paper tiger in the U.S., and we had basically a very strong China, where we all played and agreed that as our Navy went to the Asian coast, we basically would start creating another strategic tension, as we had done with terrorism in 9/11, as we had done with Afghanistan, the Haqqani group in Afghanistan, as we had done the civil war in Pakistan, and as we now supporting the Salafists in Syria. All of this is done in order to fulfill the mandates of our soldiers who have not been in duty and in action and need to have the action and test out their battle plans. In effect, our military has been very ineffective. There is no way, as I see it on the DMZ and having worked with previous generals all the way in Seoul, that you people have to understand that Seoul is only 30 miles away from the DMZ. The DMZ is literally the demarcation where 2.2 million North Korean soldiers can invade in 30 miles, and there is no army in the world, including the U.S. Army, and they know that very, very well. I've repeatedly went over this with several generals over 30 years, and I informed them that we are nothing more than what we call a tripwire. In other words, U.S. soldiers being placed here was an unnecessary expense on the behalf of the U.S. public and the American presidents as a requirement for a tripwire. That meant that as soon as the North Koreans would attack into Seoul, which they never would do, and every South Korean knew that, then there would be total conflagration. Well, that never happened in 30 years. I knew Kim Il-sung. I knew how ruthless he was, but he was very smart, and he knew
Am I correct in saying this is the greatest saber-rattling escalation, and why would the Chinese play along with the West? I mean, I know at the high levels, I mean, they're globalists manipulating both sides, but what's the larger game? Why is China playing along? I mean, we know the shift a few years ago was to ships in the Pacific. The Middle East is to be given to Al-Qaeda. There's, to be a domestic crackdown on real Americans here. That's the new war. And then have real, confrontations with the Chinese while the globalists have invested everything in China.
Well, let's take away the word globalist. What we do have here, and let me use another word, Alex, not to contradict you, but basically what we have in South Korea, unlike North Korea and even China, South Korea is the fastest growing country in the Asia. It is the highest productivity with the lowest number of unemployment. And they have been producing products from Samsung to Hyundai and selling
it it's
all
the new
over
Japan.
World.
It's the new Japan, the most connected.
It's beyond the new Japan. It is so strong it can outcompete Japan. Now let's get to China. The reason we have this confrontation with China, which we facilitated, and we deal directly with China, is the fact that we have a new leader in China named Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping is a technocrat, and much like Kim Jong-un, the new leader of North Korea, he is a spoiled, coddled princeling. In other words, in China, you have to remember there was always a one-son policy.
And he's like the baby boomer of the vicious, demonic Chi-Coms. We'll be back with Dr. Pieczenik. By the way, he's going to be on the DMZ Sunday. That'll be Monday morning on the Sunday show, 4 to 6 p.m. We're going to get Dr. Pieczenik on, let's say in the second hour, so that it can be 7 a.m. so you can actually get some sleep. So 6, 7 a.m., that'll be Sunday, 4 to 6 Central. He's there. And again, folks, this is what he's done. This is the desk he was over for a while. He's talked a lot about this. It's well known in the news media that's what he did. And he was telling me off air some interesting things. What is the big picture here, Dr. Steve Pieczenik? You're there with this crisis. How real is the crisis? What does this signify? You were getting into the new Communist Party head there in China. You agree with me during the break that he is a giant, spoiled communist baby boomer.
What this really signifies is our American inability. Over 30 years, South Korea has grown because of people like myself and others like Don Gregg, Jim Limley, who worked here and really transformed this country from a military dictatorship to a civilian one. What it also emphasizes is how poor and desperate North Korea is, because we will not absorb, we the United States and China will not absorb North Korea and a unification process into South Korea. And the reason for that is that South Korean poverty and ineptness and communism, I've had experience with 30 years ago when I took down the Soviet Union. I took down East Germany and West Germany, and everybody knows in the U.S. government that if we were to take down quickly the North Korean government, which we are able to do by just not providing food and forcing the Chinese to break open their borders, we would have a major economic crisis. So what this is a controlled agitation propaganda in order to maintain a soft landing. Now, let me explain this to our American people. The reason we work with the Chinese and the reason we work with the North Koreans, because the American public doesn't realize we're supplying food in order to keep the people in North Korea at a subsistent level. What's not possible, and what's happening here, is the frenzy of the American media, and once again Obama and his inept White House, and the ability of Secretary of State Kerry to keep his mouth shut. They have violated every principle of international crisis management, which I developed, which others have worked with, like Charles Hill and other administrations, and who know that in order to keep a crisis like this from escalating by accident, we keep the media away. We don't discuss military equipment. We don't get into the frenzy and warmongering of explaining what kind of missile systems the North Korean have, how they can shoot the missiles into the sky and get into the western part of California. It's not possible. The North Koreans have absolutely no capacity to develop a missile.
They can't even make an automobile. They can't even... they drive 57 Chevys around. They're a total joke.
It's a total joke. They have a 2.2 military army, and when I saw the equipment, it hasn't changed. Even now, as I analyze the equipment with my guide on the DMZ, and I can see the soldiers on this other side with binoculars. We have 2.2 million soldiers who are really hungry. They're starving. They don't believe anymore in North Korea. But what South Korea had done very brilliantly over the years with our encouragement was to create under Hyundai and Samsung and other
they've used the threat to control their people. Let me throw this at you. Isn't the real danger when the wall comes down and that if there's not a transition because the West wants to keep this going?
As always, Alex, you hit it right on the head. And we made that mistake. I made that mistake along with Baker and Zellick in the transformation in East Germany. What we did not realize at the time when we brought in communist Germany, which was even more economically advanced than North Korea, we had completely flooded the capability of the West Germans to handle 50,000 East Germans who didn't have work, didn't have jobs, weren't trained, weren't entrepreneur, and basically lived at subsistent level. It cost Germany and the United States a fortune.
Sure, so let's come back in 1 minute and talk about what's going to happen. It has been said by many a historian that war is the health of the state. Our authoritarian state, the Chinese authoritarian state, the North Korean authoritarian state, the South Korean state, they all stand to gain on the surface from crises, diversions, but with a collapsing hermit kingdom of Stalinist scum oppressing and sitting on top of the little skeletons that they've almost sucked dry, could this all be jockeying for some new deal, for a new level of aid, because China doesn't want to do it? Why not let the North fall, implode into China, really cause them some problems? No, the globalists don't want that. They want to use Mexico to implode into us instead. But could this get out of control? And I think what Pieczenik said to me off air is they've got a bunch of rubes and boobs, a bunch of pirates, boobies, over there who don't know what they're doing. In 4 minutes, Doc, you're back with us Sunday in the second hour. You'll have more. You're on the DMZ. If stuff breaks, if you want to stay up, we could do a nightly news tonight. I'd love you to email us some photos of what you're seeing. That'd be powerful. I'm sure you got a snapshot digital phone. What's the big danger then? Could this be the North preparing to collapse?
Well, this is partly the North preparing to collapse, but I don't believe that's the real danger. The real danger is China is in very serious trouble because China cannot control its internal security. So in turn, China and its relationship with the United States and the fact that the United States think back correctly is supporting Japan. And in the war between the United States, Japan, and China, China's only recourse is to instigate a very inappropriate agitation of North Korea, claiming that they can send missiles and all. Our best recourse now is for a Secretary of State and a president to cool everybody down, to shut down and warn CNN and all the media that if they don't stop and cease and desist to create agitation propaganda, which is the first principle of international crisis management, and then they tell our own military generals to stop talking about missiles and construction of missiles, and they have the capability to do this and try and handle it in a quiet, discreet military fashion. I have no problem if two Aegean missile system destroyers are coming in here. The South Koreans have agreed with me. They have no problem with two stealth bombers coming in or two stealth fighter fighters, but it has to be kept quiet. The success of international crisis management in an inappropriate society like Kim Jong-un, whose brain I know very well, and contrary to the media where they hype it up and said only a psychiatrist would really understand him. Well, here I am, the psychiatrist who really understands him and has 30 years of experience. But our government, our media, and our intelligence didn't want to hear anything I had to say, so I go to the only outlet and the only man and friend that I've had for 20 years who's allowed the truth to come out, and that is for us to tone down our rhetoric, stop the agitation propaganda, stop announcing what we're doing. We can quietly support Ms. Park, who's handling the situation extremely well, and I have to say the South Korean people, all 30 million of them, very young, low below the age of 40, are making fun of us and saying, yes, actually the night before I was on the DMZ zone, I had what we call the Last Supper, where everybody joked. We ate eel, we drank some kampai, and we said, okay, gentlemen, this is our Last Supper, when in fact we knew there was nothing that was to be dangerous. Seoul is moving, it's active, it's clean, it's appropriate, the people are kind, the children are kind, no one is panicked, but they find it disgusting that the United States government is creating again more crisis, more agitation in order to serve the U.S. purpose, the Chinese purpose, and to create another potential war. The danger of all of this is because our president is so inept, as we've seen in Pakistan, Iraq, and Syria, and because the White House is an old, antiquated bunch of people who have no experience whatsoever.
All right, well, stop there. I want to come back. I've got another guest coming up, Chuck Baldwin, but Dr. Pieczenik, you are a psychiatrist, a Harvard psychiatrist, and you help work the Camp David Accords. I mean, you're famous for this. Hostage negotiation, you name it. I want you to come back and tell us the danger of hyping this and getting it out of control. And I want you to briefly give us an analysis of Kim Jong-un, the Chinese leader as well, and the South Korean leader, and Obama. All right, again, thank you for joining us here in the second hour of this Friday edition, the 5th day of April, 2013. I'll be back this Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. Central, with the Sunday show. Many of our AM and FM affiliates that carry the weekday show also carry the Sunday show, but you really should call XM and get them to pick up the Sunday show as well. That's how we get on more AM and FM affiliates as well. If you're listening on the internet or on satellite in your area and there's not a local AM or FM, call the local talk station, tell them, pick up the broadcast. That's how we've gone over 150 affiliates, and we're with a small syndicator. The big three pretty much have a monopoly. We have like salmon swum upstream. And my point is, the White House responds to us, the globalists respond to us, the globalists respond to the Drudge Report. More and more, there's only a few outlets that are really able to get real news out. No one would know about the Copenhagen document that they plan to shut off the third world energy supplies and our energy supply if Infowars.com hadn't written about it with Lord Monckton and then DrudgeReport.com hadn't picked it up. I mean, there's just hundreds of things like that. No one know about the bullets, the domestic arms buildup, all of this. And listen to me. You've heard all the historians we've had on. You've heard all the military historians, all the sociologists, all the anthropologists. I am a person, because I enjoy it from a young age, am a person that's read psychology, anthropology, sociology, history. And so it's not rocket science, though. What we see forming worldwide is a decadent cascade event with corrupt, leveraged, disconnected leaders because of decadent, disconnected populations, not predominantly, but enough of it to aid them, and a government and corporate class that have become degenerate. That's when world wars happen. And we've told you that as the world economy melts down, as there's currency wars, physical wars will begin. You notice they're now saying they're not going to call Al-Qaeda Al-Qaeda. They're not going to call them Islamicist. We're now told to call them good guys. That's Associated Press today. If you just joined me, I'll go over the article. That's because the globalists are going to use them as the new proxy army because they're the old proxy army. And we've got a guy on the line who was there with Jimmy Carter when all that started and who knows Brzezinski. And he's a psychiatrist and an MD. He is an American psychiatrist, former State Department official, author, and publisher. He is currently acclaimed author in psychopolitical thrillers and the co-creator of the best-selling Tom Clancy Ops Center and Tom Clancy's Net Force paperback series, trained in psychiatry at Harvard University and International Relations at MIT. His novels are based on 20 years' experience. And the truth is, he won't ever talk about it on air, but you can go look at overthrowing major governments, get credited in psych warfare, he won't talk about it. Maybe it's not true. The London Guardian says it is. Tricking the communists to kill the prime minister, who they'd already captured. Things like that. Really interesting guy who only really pops up on this show because other places would censor him or control what he talks about. We had him on in the last hour. We've only got about 9 minutes left here. But he was the head of the desk over that area of Asia for a period of time. He helped get rid, because I remember this is on record, of the military dictatorship that was in South Korea for so long in a transition. He's there on his own with a guide given to him by the government up on the DMZ right now. I want you briefly to go over the mindset of Kim Jong-un, the mindset of the new Chinese communist leader, why Obama and the media are hyping this, and why you're saying there's a danger in the hyping where they're saying nuclear war could happen any minute. The North is saying they're going to nuke the U.S. What is behind all this, Dr. Steve Pieczenik?
Let me get into the mindset of Kim Jong-un. I know his mindset extremely well. He grew up in Geneva, Lake Geneva, in Switzerland. He went to the Swiss boarding school. By chance, it happens that I went to Swiss boarding school, but I was kicked out. He was not. He was a very poor student. He was very shy. He was very inept and really only enjoyed basketball. The reality is what you have is the classical communist scenario and paradox where the entire Kim Jong-un family and the entire Kim Jong-il family had for the 15 years lived in Lake Geneva in prosperity. And even Kim Jong-un said to his own father, how is it that I can live a life of luxury, horseback riding, shooting, skiing, and playing basketball while my people are starving? And his father just said, don't worry, we will have the money and we'll always maintain our power structure. So the real issue now is, can the Korean military control Korea? And the answer is not clear, because they take directions exactly from the communist China. And in communist China, Xi Jinping, who I have followed for over 20 years, is the son of the famous revolutionary of the Communist Party who was indicted in the Cultural Revolution and was so-called reform, but was brought up through the system because of his alliances with the military and the crony capitalism and corruption of China. China has been having problem with the United States and our force structure in Eastern Asia, and the fact that we have moved all of our battleships and our Marine Corps to Eastern Asia to deny access to the Chinese correctly, to their trading companies, and also the fact that they are collapsing internally. So two countries are collapsing internally. China, because it cannot maintain social stability, it does not have water. It has to get water from the Tibetan high marks, and the fact that its economy is totally a false economy and a runaway economy that's been funded by J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and all the hedge funds, including our former Secretary of Treasury, Paul Peterson, who knew nothing about banking M1, M2, but has always been a crony capitalist of the Chinese. So what you have is two very similar princelings who are not qualified to run their government. In terms of the Chinese leader, he's a technocrat, never had diplomatic experience, lived in the United States, really does not understand how to maintain social stability, like Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, Zhou Enlai, Liu Shaoqi, and all the original revolutionaries. He's spoiled, he's corrupt, and all their families are corrupt. In the same way we have this corruption in the spoiled Kim Jong-un, who grew up in Switzerland. You can't think of him as a North Korean. You have to think of him as the preppy Swiss boarding school boy who's shy, inept, has never been in the military, has been forced by his own military to be the face of Korea because his father felt that his oldest son, Kim Jong-un, was too feminine, so he needed a stronger face. So what we have is a paper doll China and a paper doll North Korea, all creating an episode because the United States military has come in and said, we're going to protect our national security interest, our economic interest is all the way from Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, and Japan. The reason for that is China has engaged in what we call a low-intensity conflict in the Spratly Islands, which I wrote about 20 years ago, in Pax Pacifica. Longer handle the internal economy. So when they can no longer handle the internal economy, they push the Chinese, the Koreans, in order to make the kind of noise and what we called in psychiatry acting out behavior or baby-like behavior. I call Kim Jong-un the baby in the crib who screams and yells, looks at missiles that really can't fly anywhere, has no capacity. There's one of the few guys in America who understands this, Charles Hill, worked in North Korea. And really what they're doing is we're fostering that type of reaction so that we can demonstrate how strong our Navy is, how strong our capability to control the situation. But in fact, what's happening is we're showing the opposite. In the South Korean people and the South Korean Army and intelligence is seeing exactly what I'm seeing on the DMZ zone. We've become a joke. We send over 2 stealth fighter planes, F-22, which has absolutely no relevance because the North Koreans can never attack South Korea. Otherwise, they will be destroyed, 22 million people. And South Seoul is only 30 miles away. I'm right on the top of that nuclear storm, right on the DMZ, as I'm talking to young Korean soldiers who, quite frankly, are not prepared to go to war and know under the hearts of hearts that they will not confront the North Koreans as they're coming over. But once that Kim Jong-un, underneath the Chinese provocation and American ineptness in handling this control, will create a situation where it will be out of control. In the case of his grandfather, they blew up the South Korean presidential platform. In the case of his father, they also blew up ships. So what happens in a certain crisis can get blown out very quickly, number one, because we don't have a president who really is qualified to run a crisis.
Well, that was my final point, is that you've got special crony capitalist interests that want to work with authoritarian regimes, as Carol Quigley wrote at Georgetown. They want weak people reading off teleprompters. So now there's no leadership anywhere. It's like an absurdist science fiction Kurt Vonnegut novel where some kid from Switzerland is commanding a bunch of psychopaths, vampires. You've got China on the edge of collapse. You've got insanity here. You've got crony interests shutting down all their competition. I mean, it looks like a civilization collapse type event down the road with this type of lunacy, and then building up North Korea to the South Koreans looks completely insane because they know what jokes they are. I mean, this is Alice in Wonderland.
That's correct. It's more than Alice in Wonderland. It's Alice in Wonderland on steroids and LSD. It's a total non-reality because in talking to all the the South Korean students, workers, and military, they can't take this seriously. So we considered the day of the war that Kim Jong-il declared the end of the world yesterday. I went out with some of my South Korean military friends and intelligence operatives, and we had our last supper consisting of eel, Diet Coke, and rice, and we all laughed, showing how incompetent the leader of Kim Jong-un was, the leader of China, and also POTUS.
I guess it will be your last meal with Diet Coke with the aspartame.
That we were sending over 2 stealth bombers, which cost us close to $500 million to $1 billion like a paper tiger, which China was like, and we can do nothing in the entire situation.
All right, well, Doc,
and the South Koreans have complained to me is we have created agitation propaganda in the news media.
All right, Doc, we got to go to break. I got to come back with one more segment with you because I got to find out, what do you expect to see come out of this? What is the danger then if it's all just posturing? Final segment from the DMZ with Dr. Steve Pieczenik. All right, final segment with Dr. Steve Pieczenik. He'll be back Sunday with us in the second hour of the Sunday broadcast. I've got Mr. O'Keefe of the Veritas Project coming on, who went to the Hollywood Hills home of Piers Morgan, who has a armed response signs up saying he has armed guards. The hypocrisy of the so-called ruling class wanting us, their quarry, disarmed. Dr. Pieczenik, sum it all up for people. You told me during the break what the real danger is, that Korea will implode, North Korea will implode north and south into China and into South Korea and trigger World War III. In your own words, repeat that and talk about what the establishment is doing and why you think it's so dangerous.
What's going to happen now is because of this predictable, everyone in the media says that these North Koreans are crazy and unpredictable. The answer is no. They have been extremely predictable, including Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un, the little princelet. We know exactly the behavior pattern. We know exactly how they work. We know that every time they act out, we can control it. But in order to control it, we need a very effective President of the United States, an effective Secretary of State, which Kerry is not, an effective intelligence community, which we do not have, and a military that's not gung-ho and understands the limits of the capability. The limits of the capability is that, very simply, that if North Korea attacks South Korea, which is not likely through Seoul because we're only 30 miles away, if they act out in any way that we cannot manage because of the hype that we have created through a CNN, Wolf Blitzes, Zakaria, and Amanpour, and other generals in the U.S. Army who should be shut down and indicted for creating agitation propaganda, we could have literally an implosion of North Korean poverty scurrying over into South Korea, and then have a major collapse of both North Korea and South Korea, but more importantly of China, because the North Koreans are so poor that they're screaming over the border of China. So we have an incompetent Xipeng, who's a technocrat, a princeling, and a spoiled Chinese technocrat, very much like Kim Jong-un, who's a spoiled Switzerland-trained a leader who has been whored by every intelligence community in the world, including the French, the Swiss, the Americans, the Germans, the Russians, you name them, because of 15 years, if you're in a Swiss boarding school and you're playing basketball and you're not very smart and you're quite effeminate and you don't know how to deal with women, you certainly don't know how to manage a country. So we're coming into very quickly, thanks to our American media and the frenzy of American media, the frenzy of the military, particularly the Navy, to say that we're bringing in a GNCs, that we will send in stealth bombers, does not do anything to control or quiet the temper of a crisis, which is the principles of crisis management that I created 30 years ago. And very sagacious people like Don Gregg, Jim Lilly, and others who had worked in the CIA and had been our ambassadors here understood that you keep the agitation and the warmongering to the lowest flame. What we're doing now is increasing the flame, thanks to CNN, thanks to our military and our Navy, thanks to the ignorance of the White House, the ineptness of our president, the ineptness of the Chinese, and the ineptness of the North Korea. We could literally land in a World War III with not only nuclear proliferation, but there is gas warfare and the ability of that we would never thought possible of the North Koreans to come into South Korea, because Seoul, where I am located, I'm only 10 kilometers away from North Korea, and I can see the North Koreans right now. I see Kim Il-sung's stations. I see the mobilization of their troops, but at the same time, the young troops in South Korea are not qualified to fight into an army that has only 3 days of petroleum, lubricant, and oil. So what we have here is an impending crisis that's totally mismanaged.
Well, isn't that
totally
101 that you don't build
Chinese.
up the enemy as super dangerous and powerful? They should be laughing at Kim Jong-un, calling him pathetic and weak, and he can't even get
what's happening in South Korea. Excuse me, Alex. Everybody here is laughing. We're talking about it, and we're saying how absurd North Korea is. We have absolutely no regard for Xi Peng, and we find him very inept, as the Chinese students should start rioting in China to say this is not the leader of China. But more importantly, we find it very disgraceful what America is doing by announcing they're sending 2 stealth bombers, one Chinese, one South Korean official said to me, how stupid can you Americans be to send billions of dollars worth of 2 planes that will do absolutely nothing, Aegean missile systems that will do nothing because it cannot protect from a nuclear war, and all it is a posture of a paper tiger would become, where we're creating a situation where we show our weakness, we show our incompetence, we show our lack of capability to handle this situation, which should literally land into World War III. But we know everything about Kim Jong-un.
All right, we're going to get an update, Doc. We got to go to break. I'm going to come back with our next guest. We're going to get an update. A very serious situation Sunday. His website, stevepieczenik.com. I'm Alex Jones with Infowars.com. You have found it, the tip of the spear in the fight for human liberty. Doesn't even mean I do that good of a job, but I do the best I can, and God knows that. I love liberty. I love justice. I get hurt by tyranny, and I'm going to tell a story about that here in a moment, and go to Pastor Chuck Baldwin, who's going to be riding shotgun with us into the next hour with Dr. Greg Dixon to talk about the takeover of the church in this country and how they're openly going along with the persecution of veterans, gun owners, all of it. My only gift, I think, is to recognize things hidden in plain view. Like if I walked into my living room and there was a 1,000-pound, elephant sitting there, a 10,000-pound elephant, I would recognize it as an elephant. If Barbara Walters told me it wasn't an elephant, I would tell her she was a liar. Now, that's called being a conspiracy theorist. But we're going to be talking to Chuck Baldwin, Pastor Baldwin, former Constitution Party presidential candidate, of course, and someone demonized as very evil, along with Ron Paul and myself, by Homeland Security. But first off, this whole North Korea thing will probably blow over. But it shows how it's the greatest rhetoric since that war ended more than 50 years ago. And you notice they're putting al-Qaeda in the Middle East, and the AP says, don't call them al-Qaeda, don't even call them Islamicists. They're good guys. The CFR says, quote, we need al-Qaeda. The new enemy is the American people. I mean, this is earth-shaking, off-the-charts, congressional investigation, freaking out. Oh, my gosh, they want to use Homeland Security as a coup d'etat against America. I mean, that's what it is. Instead, it's like, yeah, now we fight returning veterans. Take all their guns and take their kids. I mean, this is Civil War stuff. But despite all that, we need to just pray, move forward, speak out, and resist, because you wouldn't have the White House demonizing alternative media, attacking Drudge, saying they're causing us problems when we're on Drudge every week, attacking us as well, if we didn't have power. And when I say, hey, there's not many of us actually fighting, that's saying, hey, join us. Look, we're only few that are actually prominent, but we are hundreds of millions worldwide that know about liberty. If we just speak out, the enemy can be defeated. There are different forces in the world. It's not just evil. And we just give the world over to evil. The truth is, folks, I've confronted the New World Order over and over again, and because I don't have fear, I only have fear of them winning. I only have fear of my weakness and my failure and my dirty rags, that are my best works. But my spirit, I mean, when I see Christians having their children taken for no reason, or I see people having their kids taken for not taking vaccines when there's no law, I sit there and go to bed early, and I don't want to call it depressed. They'll come take my guns. I mean, I feel it. And people are like, oh, that's wimpy. Don't care about other people. It's because I am strong, ladies and gentlemen, that I burn with something beyond hatred or even love, total commitment against these people. And just the anger that my flesh is so weak, it can't work 18 hours a day, every day. And that I cannot express to you the things I've researched and I know, but I know you know in your heart what's happening. And just the evil, the acceptance of abortion, and now forced inoculations, and now veterans having their kids taken for no reason. It's not just your guns. And they're saying, I've got Geithner articles where they're going to start taking, they already started taking government pension funds. You fools that serve this. We're going to go to Pastor Baldwin. I want to just remind you that while all this is happening, our bodies being strong is key, and supporting InfoWars is key. And we've assembled the very best vitamins, minerals, really miraculous stuff like Beyond Tangy Tangerine, Polymers Plus, and almost 400 other products discounted at InfoWarsHealth.com. That's InfoWarsHealth.com. And this is the InfoWarsHealth.com challenge. I am challenging listeners to get healthy in the face of the New World Order in the month of April. I'm challenging all of this. So, again, go to InfoWarsHealth.com. And I'm challenging listeners to go to InfoWarsHealth.com and sign up and try the great products like Beyond Tangy Tangerine, the Alex Pack, the Healthy Start Pack, Pollen Burst Plus, Root Beer Belly, Probiotic, Cell Shield, RT Cube, all of it, the best turmeric root. It's all up there, InfoWarsHealth.com, or give our team a call at 888-789-9277, 888-789-9277. Get healthy, get in shape. Spring has sprung and summer's around the corner. Get ready. Not just for swimsuit season. It's not about that. It's about getting yourself healthy, your mind focused. They feed us garbage for a reason. Help us go to the next level also by purchasing the longevity products at InfoWarsHealth.com. It is absolutely essential. Read the big Research Institute, Clemson University, on the health effects of some of the products up there on the site. See the informational videos and more. InfoWarsHealth.com or 888-789-9277. Get the high-quality ProPure water filtration systems at InfoWarsStore.com. The lowest prices with promo code WATER. And spread the word about the broadcast and support our local sponsors. Because think of the launch pad we are for all the other activists and researchers and people here on this show. When you get the ProPure water filters from us, you already get the lowest price with promo code WATER, and you support the war against the tyrants. We're not funded by the globalists. We're funded by people like you. And so support pro-Second Amendment organizations. Support everybody. Liberty doesn't have a lobby, okay? We don't have one. We don't have a real lobby. Foreign banks do. They've taken us over. We are the lobby for liberty. All right, shifting gears now. I wanted to get Pastor Chuck Baldwin on last week when I saw this article, Franklin Graham on the wrong side of the Bible and history. He's come out calling for a massive restriction of the Second Amendment. The official Catholic newspaper, we're going to show that, has come out and said, quote, repeal the Second Amendment. You've got every denomination I know of. I can't go to a church, a Baptist church, a Pentecostal church, a Bible church, without hearing government worship. And I, for one, have had enough, okay? And he wrote the book, Romans 13, The True Meaning of Submission. We also sell that at InfoWarsStore.com. Great book to give to your pastors. But they're under 501c3 government funding. But now they're coming out after the guns. We've got to go after them. And I wanted to ask Pastor Baldwin, biblically, he doesn't really need an introduction here on this broadcast. He's a radio talk show host, syndicated columnist. Of course, been a pastor many years in Florida. Now he's out in the mountain area building a remnant community out there. Staunch defender of the Bill of Rights, Constitution, ChuckBaldwinLive.com. I wanted to ask him in this great time of evil, what do we do? What does he think we should do? Because there is a purge against constitutionalists. It's begun. And as every other authoritarian regime, it starts quietly. You know, a lot of times the arrest, for petty made-up stuff starts, and no one even covers it, and no one recognizes it until it just becomes overwhelming or the dictatorship collapses. So, Pastor Baldwin, thank you so much for coming on with us.
Hey, great to be with you, Alex. Thank you very much.
Well, you just heard that 7-minute intro there where I was talking about all this. Where do you want to start first? I mean, it's like the dam broke, the hedge is being lifted, evil is flooding in, and the preachers are all bought off.
Yeah, unfortunately, the 501c3 tax-exempt status has made slaves out of most pastors and churches. They fear the IRS. They fear the loss of their tax-exempt status. And so when they get into the pulpits, they are afraid to discuss anything that might be controversial. Plus, let's not forget this. There's a lot of people out there in the congregations that are very weak, very wishy-washy. They do not want to hear the hard issues. A lot of pastors are deathly afraid of offending their own congregations. And they're afraid of losing the tithes and offerings of people. They're afraid of the controversy that may erupt inside the congregation. That combination has completely neutered the pulpits of America. And you're right. The churches and the pastors of America are literally contributing to the decline of our liberties here in this country today.
It's now come out that the official communist Chinese government is advising Obama on gun policy. If you just tuned in, folks, just the People's Daily repeatedly, it's been national news a few months ago. They are now demanding every Hollywood film be put by them. No form of communism or authoritarianism can even be shown. Forget criticizing communist China. Nothing can be shown. We're now not just run by the New World Order here. The communist Chinese that own our debt are occupying us. And the reason I bring that up is, look at this. The preachers are afraid to say anything that offends, so now they're banning Lego toys of Jabba the Hutt because some Muslims said it was supposed to be a Muslim just out of the clear blue sky. Political correctness is political control. The Soviet Union called it political correctness. And so now the preachers are like, I don't want to offend anyone. That's then used as a weapon to where now they can't even teach marriage. They won't even criticize abortion because it might offend someone. Now they're taking the crosses out of churches all over America. I know you know about that initiative. I mean, this is it. Do you agree the takeover is now happening?
Oh, there's no question. I think it's been happening, Alex. You know, back years ago when I was running for president in 2008, I was going around the country and talking to pastors, and I couldn't tell you how many of them would say, well, you know, we believe in what you stand for, and we know that you're speaking the truth, and we know that we need change, and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, after all, we're 501c3 and we can't get involved, and, you know, so we'll just pray for you. So, again, that 501c3 tax-exempt status has been the tool that Lyndon Johnson first created back in the 1950s, that he knew what would happen. He knew it would neuter and control the pastors and churches. And that's exactly what it's done. And now when you get guys like Franklin Graham and Richard Land, who, by the way, is a member of the CFR, as you know, coming out saying that they support Barack Obama's gun control initiatives, especially the universal background check, you know, it shows the power that the government has over many of these evangelical leaders. By the way, Alex, that's why my son Tim and I have written a brand new book called To Keep or Not to Keep, Why Christians Should Not Give Up Their Guns. It's a brand new book. It's just about to be released from the printer.
I want to carry it. I want to carry it because we carry your book on Romans 13. Absolutely. Very exciting.
This is going to be a blockbuster because we go into the New Testament, the Old Testament, the entire Scripture, and we prove conclusively that nowhere does the Bible teach that Christians should surrender their guns to any would-be tyrant. We go into in depth. It's a blockbuster book. There's nothing like it in print. And when Christians get a hold of this, and even non-Christians, they're going to realize that natural law, biblical law, revealed law is on the side of the Second Amendment. And so this is going to be a book that's really going to help people understand the issue. And somebody needs to send a copy to Franklin Graham, by the way.
We're going to talk about that coming up here in a moment, but I'm sure you're familiar with it, but I followed it. But I talk to vets every day who've had a leg blown off or something. They get them to say they're depressed, and they take their child, even though their wife is fine. They're not just taking veterans' guns now. They're also taking their children. And then you see cases where anti-government parents, engineers with no criminal record, Air Force veteran, they took their kids, from the government that had had them for a year, and then they demonize Infowars.com because the guy had a sticker at his house in Florida. And, I mean, are they going to, like, come grab my kids and say I'm anti-government? It's like, well, there go your kids to a re-education camp. I mean, they're just hiding this pure authoritarianism in plain view, and every TV show now demonizes Christians, demonizes pro-lifers, demonizes gun owners. I mean, it's like The Running Man or something. You turn on any show, and they're demonizing patriots and saying we're terrorists. I mean, this is Twilight Zone level.
Yeah, it is. And what's amazing to me relative to the way you started the discussion here with pastors is, do these pastors really think that by them sitting back and not speaking up and not taking a stand, that they're going to be spared? Do they really think that they're going to be overlooked? You know, I think this is very comparable to the Nazi Germany period of history, when there were some 14,000 evangelical churches in Germany at the time. And of the 14,000 evangelical churches in Nazi Germany, was becoming Nazi Germany, only 800 resisted Adolf Hitler. That's about 5%. Now think about it, Alex. If 25% had have resisted Hitler, if 50% had have resisted Hitler, the entire history of the world would have been changed. But because the pastor said and did nothing, Hitler was allowed to seize control of the government and then the country and enact all these totalitarian...
And 20 million, they were like 75 million. Germany, counting 2 million soldiers, lost 20 million people. Talk about a judgment. Talk about doing nothing. And it's the same story over and over. And authoritarians every time come after Christians. That's the point, is that you're never going to do enough for them.
Exactly my point. And that's what the preachers don't understand. They think that by remaining neutral and trying to maintain politically correct messages, etc., that they are somehow going to be spared any of this. They're in denial. Actually.
Well, it's also a cop-out. They go, we're trying to win souls. Yeah, we know the evil's taken over. I went to a big church this weekend with Dave Mustaine when he was in town. Pretty good sermon overall. I like the preacher. But I saw the assistant preacher and stuff looking at us like scared, like, oh, my gosh, there's Alex Jones. Man, that guy's trouble. And I didn't do anything or say anything. I just went and checked out that church because my wife likes it. But my point is that I've friends and family that go to Baptist churches. They get letters going, don't even talk about politics at church dinners. I mean, this is the Soviet Union. And as you know, Thomas Jefferson didn't even say religion shouldn't be involved in things. It said government cannot be involved in religion. As the First Amendment states, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. But they've taken separation of church and state and made a debate about does it exist or not, when it never even meant that. It meant the government has no jurisdiction, but they trick people into 501c3. They stop being a church and become a charity.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. They're not a church. They are a government corporation. The pastor is not a pastor. He is a corporate officer. Same with the deacons, the elders. They are viewed as corporate officers of the state. And I really believe, and this is kind of harsh for me to say, but I mean, I've been in the heart of this battle for so long, and I really believe what I'm about to tell you, Alex. I really believe that at the heart of the problem, our pastors and churches today are state worshipers.
They are.
I really believe that. They do not worship the King of the universe, the King of kings and Lord of lords. They pretend that they do. They sing songs. They have praise services. They have worship services. They talk about Jesus. They preach the gospel, etc. But every time when push comes to shove and you got to make a decision, government is going to be the one that you side with.
That's right. Who you serve is who you obey.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And who you give preference to, and who you give loyalty to, and who you give sovereignty to. And what's happened in our churches today is that they have fallen for this erroneous Romans 13 interpretation that Tim and I wrote about, and you sell the book on your show, and so many of your listeners and readers have purchased it. That Romans 13 misinterpretation has propagandized the church, indoctrinated the church to the point that they're no longer able to properly analyze government from a biblical point of view.
It was Hitler's most quoted passage in his radio addresses. Do what I say, Romans 13. Do what I say, Romans 13. When we're going to talk about that, but first, the gun grabbing. You'll be with us into the next hour with Pastor Greg Dixon, who is not 501c3, and so they seized the biggest church in America. Stay with us. The people running things are not liberals. They're authoritarians calling themselves liberal. Here's stories up at Infowars.com right now. Canadian woman arrested for Instagram photo of graffiti. Unbelievable. It's just a photo of somebody shot of graffiti. Are going to arrest Sylvester Stallone for his movies? Only individuals. They're getting us used to being disappeared. Confirmed. This is big breaking news. We already knew that they were keeping secret the drugs he was on, but now confirmed Holmes was on psychotropic drugs. Oh, really? Think so? Infowars.com, prisonplanet.com. They fought for that not to come out. Just like Adam Lanza. Get that out to everybody. University lockdown caused by zombie game, Nerf gun. Oh, yeah, orange, pink guns, police gun, bubble gums, police guns. Obama, I am constrained by the system our founders put in place, but he's not. He's running over it. That's just some of the news right now. up at Infowars.com. Parents who took kids back from CPS demonized as anti-government. By the way, speaking of his book, it's available up at the website, InfoWarsStore.com, Romans 13, The True Meaning of Submission. And we're also carrying the film that I produced, Strategic Relocation, A Noble Lie, Exposing False Flag Terror, and After the Tribulation. And I want to ask Pastor Baldwin his view on that, because I just see the whole thing as a cop-out. You know, whether it's pre, mid, post, whatever. But I always hear, well, it's the end of the world anyway, so why fight evil? Why not go out and warn people then? I think God's going to say he didn't know you. But this is a short segment. We're going to have you with us into the next hour on Pastor Dixon, who was persecuted, biggest Baptist church or biggest church in the country, period, because he wouldn't be under government control, thought I was in America. But get into Franklin Graham, your article, the Southern Baptist Convention coming out and saying, get rid of the Second Amendment. I mean, this is incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's imperative that Christians and non-Christians alike understand that this is a very, very serious attempt to dismantle the Second Amendment. And unfortunately, we have many evangelical leaders, such as Franklin Graham, Richard Land, and many others, who have taken the position that the state is always right and that you never resist, you never question the state. And if the state says that you are to register your guns, then you're supposed to register your guns. If a universal background check, then so be it. As we know, the FEMA camps have been, the FEMA has been instructing pastors for many years in schooling them in when the president declares a national emergency, asking the pastors to instruct the congregations to surrender their firearms. This has been going on for years. You've been reporting on this for years. So have I.
And by the way, 4 years before it was declassified, we broke it with Pastor Butch Paul, yourself, and others here on Genesis, and we broke it nationally. But people couldn't believe hundreds of pages of training manual. They found out the pastor went and threatened him, kicked him out of the hospital where he did free ministry for people. And it gets worse. There's the red light. FEMA training to take guns and have pastors prepared for it. They're planning to come for the guns. This is like catching, the Nazis, infiltrating the White House, or the Chi-Coms. I mean, this shows the authoritarian, creeping nature that they're waiting for these shootings, which a lot of them they're staging.
Yeah, whether they're staged or not, the result is the same. They're using the opportunity to come after the people's guns. And this is where I think that the book that Tim and I have written is so important, Alex, instructing Christians that nowhere does the Bible teach that they are supposed to surrender their guns. And even in the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus said to Simon Peter, put up thy sword, they that live by the sword die by the sword. That has been misinterpreted so much by Christians through the years. It has nothing to do with surrendering your guns. In fact, Simon Peter kept his sword. He put it in his scabbard. Jesus protected him. The power of his voice knocked over the soldiers that came to arrest them. Simon Peter and the other disciple that was armed walked out of the Garden of Eden with their arm. By the way, it was against Roman law for them to carry a Roman sword.
Absolutely. They were slaves. They were captured. Stay there. All right. He's with us for another 30 minutes. He'll be riding shotgun with Dr. Greg Dixon. We're going to tell that story of a church now many years ago. Was it 12 years ago? That their employees even paid taxes. Paid the withholding, all that. The church said, we're not going to handle money. We're not indentured servants. We don't have to do this. We're not under the government. We don't want your 501c3. And they came and stole their church and arrested everybody. And, that's Soviet Union, ladies and gentlemen. And that's why the churches have all rolled over and said, we'll push abortion. We'll say turn the guns in. Billy Graham's son is out there, saying you don't need guns. It is so demonic, and I can't wait to read your new book if it's anything like Romans 13, full of all the quotes to give to these preachers. They already know the truth, but again, they don't really want to be preachers. They want to be married to the state. They are high priest of the state-run churches. Let's go back to Chuck Baldwin. Chuck, you were trying to get into Romans 13. What should we be saying to Franklin Graham and the rest of these people that say, turn your guns in? The big Catholic newspaper said, quote, repeal the Second Amendment.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what are they going to do with the words of Jesus when he told the disciples that if they needed to sell their clothes whatever they had to do, go buy a sword. What are they going to do with that? What are they going to do with the fact that Jesus of the New Testament is Jehovah of the Old Testament? And we have the command of God in the Old Testament of many of the deliverers of Israel to arm themselves and to defend and to conquer.
Yeah, God never told his people to lay down.
No, never. They always resisted. If you were going to take out of the Bible all of the stories of resistance, you would reduce the Bible by probably 60 or 65%. Many of the great stories that we revere as Christians in the Word of God, both Old and New Testaments, have to do with resisting civil authority, all the way from Daniel.
That's right. The authorities are always resisted and always, put in the line. But the love stuff, turn the other cheek, is with your family, with people around you, trying to work things out. That's where a correct pastor, we see the turning the other cheek, not letting people set you up. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, and all this is covered in our book, To Keep or Not to Keep, Why Christians Should Not Give Up Their Guns. We go into all these passages of Scripture, and we deal with them individually, one by one, and we show that it does not teach submission to tyranny, that just the opposite is taught. There is a revealed and natural law given by God for self-defense. That is an innate, inalienable right.
Weapons everywhere restrain evil, as Thomas Jefferson said.
It is a biblical principle. It is a natural law principle. It's founded and grounded in the Word of God, in the precepts of Scripture. And for Christians to take the tack that government is God, and that we are to do whatever government says, regardless of how scriptural or unscriptural it might be, is idolatry. I mean, let's call it what it is, Alex. It's idolatry. It is the worship of the state. And what I'm concerned about is that there are many pastors and Christians out there that really aren't maybe in their hearts understanding what they're doing. But they've been taught this so long and so often that they just think that's the only accepted theology. They've never been taught anything else. That's why in 1775 and 76, Jonas Clark had instructed his congregants at the Church of Lexington for years before the events of April 19, 1775 on Lexington Green, which took place right in front of the church house where those men worshiped every Sunday. And so whenever that day came and they marched on Concord to seize the arms, they were able to stand in front of them, those Minutemen that were mainly the church congregation of the Church of Lexington, Pastor Jonas Clark. They were able to do that because the pastor had taught them the principles of liberty for many, many, many years.
Well, most of the militias were led by the preachers. That's why the King of England said, "Damn these black brigades."
That's right. And when we
That's a quote.
We've resurrected the Black Regiment on my website at chuckbaldwinlive.com. If you're looking for a Black Regiment church, you might find one there.
Absolutely. We'll be right back. Resurrecting the Black Regiment. Stay with us. Pastor Dixon coming up. All right, if you just joined us, ladies and gentlemen, there is undoubted persecution against Christians, libertarians, conservatives, anti-abortion people, pro-lifers, pro-Second Amendment groups. We get countless calls on air. I see it in the news. All I do is read news all day, where they'll say, yeah, man arrested for his bumper sticker, pro-life bumper sticker. And you're like, that's got to be a joke. Family went to anti-government rally, children taken, or anti-government people wouldn't give kids vaccines, children taken. There is no law to take the vaccines. But the family courts aren't real courts. They're so devilish. They were set up as a race sterilization operation in 1910 in New York. See, I know the whole history of it. People were like, well, the judge said we didn't give them the shots, so they took the kids. And they just eyeball, they think you're ignorant and you don't know how to fight back. They go, sign this, you'll get your kids back. And you sign it, you're admitting you're bad. And then through fraud, they go, I've got the confession. I mean, these are authoritarian criminals all over the place. And look, if you're good cops out there and you're getting mad hearing this, well, you're guilty. Because I'm not talking about you. The system is corrupt. There's no doubt some jurisdictions are better, haven't been totally taken over. But this country is evil. This country has rationalized and rationalized. Now, I want to read to you in fact, will you guys pull up the First Amendment online for me? I need to have my pocket constitution. It's normally in here. Somebody picked it up. All orders of books and videos get a free pocket constitution. First Amendment starts with, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And then it goes on, or freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, or the right to, assemble or redress of grievances. But there it is. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or the press or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievance. Okay, now, you never heard it was Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. This country, my dad's family goes back to the Mayflower. This is very rare, by the way. It's 200,000+ Americans are living, had somebody on the Mayflower. My mother had two people on the Mayflower. I forget his name, the barrel maker and the famous woman. They got married. The lowest guy on the totem pole was the barrel maker. They got married. That's my ancestors. And then my dad's side, kind of a scoundrel of a guy, but the captain of the Mayflower. Now, the whole point here is, ladies and gentlemen, they had gone, and my mother's gone and visited where my family was from in England and then went over to the Netherlands. She's been over there, where they have the original little churches of the Pilgrims. They were going all over the place trying to read the Bible and not worship government. Because everywhere else you had a government-run church, and they spied on you. They didn't teach the Bible. Didn't matter whether it was England's fake Protestant churches, from their perspective, the Catholic Church, all of it. It all became political. And so that happened. So I want to explain something to you. This country was founded on religious freedom, and they could still never get it in the colonies because people would take over and try to make you follow their version. So when you see the churches saying we're 501c3, which just turns them into a government charity, a government corporation. See, in the 50s, all the denominations said, sign on to this, you still get your tax exemption. And they got tricked. Oh, really? And it was a contract fraud, going from a church outside jurisdiction into a contract. Now, Pastor Greg Dixon had the biggest standalone church in the country. It was all over 60 Minutes, you name it. Anti-globalist, anti-New World Order, just Bible-believing. Biggest church, Indianapolis Baptist Temple, 8,000+ member, 41 years, and his son now pastors it. But but they had been 501c3, and he can tell the story better than I. And then I've got Chuck Baldwin with him to go back and forth here. But the point is that they came and took their church. Now they said, well, you've got to pay taxes. Their church members paid the fake income tax, but it's not the church's job to collect it and run it. That's indentured servitude. And now you see the churches of America starting to say, abortion's good. Turn our guns in are good. They're not even churches. And in just a decade, this has happened. And now they have the clergy response teams, mainstream news, telling their flocks, turn your guns in, it's of the Lord. America, the National Catholic Review, repeal the Second Amendment. This is happening. And whether you're Catholic, Protestant, whatever it is, and even if you're not a quote, Christian, you better be concerned. Because when the churches become state-run, you've got authoritarianism. Now, Chuck Baldwin, you want to introduce this topic, and because I know you're an expert on it as well, and then bring up Pastor Greg Dixon, a graduate of the Baptist Bible College, Springfield, Missouri, in 1953. And, of course, famous Baptist preacher in his own right. I'm not going to go over his whole bio. There was a 91-day, quote, siege where they wouldn't leave the church, but the media called it a siege, like they were terrorists. And we'll give you their website as well. I mean, I'm ranting here because this is so evil, and it's just accepted now. So explain what's happening here, and did I break it down correctly, Pastor Chuck Baldwin?
Yeah, yes, you did. And Greg and I go back a long ways. He's a dear friend. I'm glad you got him on. Everybody should be familiar with this story. What you said is exactly right. Greg Dixon was preaching the gospel without the 501c3 tax-exempt status. The tax issue that you described was what happened, and they came in. And by the way, people need to realize that this took place under the Bush administration, and G.W. Bush. In fact, this is one of the first things that the new G.W. Bush administration did, was seize Indianapolis Baptist Temple. First time in history that a church in the United States had been seized by the federal government. And that happened under a Republican presidential administration.
And we know why, because they were getting ready with the faith-based initiative to buy off the churches, so they had to get rid of the major group that was resisting it.
I think they wanted to make Greg an example. He was the guy that they saw as the thorn in their side, and they wanted to make him an example. And that's exactly what they did. They didn't kill the church. His son is still pastoring. They're still growing. They're still preaching. They're still winning souls. They're doing a great job for the Lord. But they definitely seized the church, and they sent a message to preachers all over America that you better, kowtow to the IRS or we're going to come and get you.
And again, spun it in the media like they stole money and demanded millions. Every dime had been paid to the offshore Federal Reserve crime group. They just had the members of the church individually do it because Congress can make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Pastor Greg Dixon, thank you for joining us today. I want to get into your story for people, but you broke it all down, or you could say prophesied, it wasn't hard to do, that as you guys went down, the church would become a pure organ of Satan, and now by and large it has become that.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate being on the program today and appreciate the great work that you're doing.
Thank you, sir.
I'm holding in my hands right here the front page of the Indianapolis Star, Wednesday, February the 14th, 2001. The headline says, Feds Seize Baptist Temple, and the front page, and it has the picture.
You can show viewers.
100 federal marshals came in and broke down the doors of the Indianapolis Baptist Temple, and it says Feds seized Baptist Temple. Well, they didn't. Thank God they didn't seize the Baptist Temple. They did carry some of us out, and but we were seen worshiping together the next night at the Jonathan Bird's cafeteria, the convention center out there.
So they stole the land and the building.
We've been worshiping together ever since.
Yeah.
So they did seize the buildings and sold off $6 million worth of property, 22 acres of land right in the middle of Indianapolis, and sold it for $1.5 million. And there's where we had a Christian school. They now have a charter school. We say they have a communist school now, where we were teaching the Bible. They're teaching atheism. Where we were teaching the free enterprise system, they're teaching communism. Where we were teaching creationism, they're teaching Darwinism. So anyway, they've got their charter school there now. But the church is still going right on. Praise God for that. But nevertheless, the church is still there. I think it's very important, and it's good to be united with my good friend Chuck Baldwin again. We've been good friends for a long, long time. We were comrades together in arms with the Moral Majority back in the 80s. It's always good to be with Chuck again. And he's a great soldier of the cross, I will assure you that. But I think it's important for people to understand that under communism in China, they had the Three Self movement. The Three Self movement was this: state-recognized churches, state-financed churches, and then the church was to espouse state propaganda. That's exactly what we have in America. We have state-recognized churches through incorporation, through 501c3 recognition under the IRS. Then you've got state-financed churches through the tax-deductible gift and tax exemption, and then the churches are to espouse federal public policy. Now, that's exactly where we are. The reason that the churches won't take a stand and the pastors won't take a stand is because they don't want to give up their tax exemption and they don't want to give up their tax-deductible gifts. Because this is all of the religious organizations in America who are not churches. They couldn't exist without the tax-deductible gift.
So they're worshiping the golden calf.
That's right. And the churches could not exist without the tax-deductible gift. The First Baptist Church of Dallas, downtown Dallas, they have just built a massive, massive new building project right downtown Dallas. They couldn't do it without.
That's where my grandma went when she, I tell you what, stay there. We're going to come back and talk about what this means. Even if you're not a Christian, folks, having a state-run church means look out, look out. We are in trouble. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central, live, back weeknights, 7 o'clock Central. InfoWars Nightly News, and I'll be back live this Sunday, as I am every Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. I wasn't live, obviously, on Easter. We'll be live this Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. We're going to have a live report from the DMZ. It'll be 7 a.m. Monday his time with Dr. Pieczenik there on the North Korea situation. If stuff happens, I'll be in here doing live feeds on the audio and video streams at InfoWarsNews.com and PrisonPlanet.tv. Chuck Baldwin's riding shotgun with us for another 20 minutes or so, and then we're going to go right up to near the end of the show with Dr. Dixon. I have a couple special reports I'm going to air before the main broadcast ends. But here's my bottom line, Pastor Dixon. I want you to recap your story and then now what you see happening with the churches, and then get Pastor Baldwin's take on it. But it's simple. People that give in to corrupt governments, they get totally overrun, because then even more evil people who will push it further will get into government, and then more evil and more evil. So you end up getting kind of a survival of the most evil. And that's why you end up with human sacrifice in every culture, mass death, worship of government. And this worship of government is the opposite of what was given to the Israelites by God. Was the first time you don't worship government, you worship God. It's like they said to, hey, Saul, you don't want a king. Israel, you don't want a king. And you follow what God says, and so no one can then dispute that. And so we are the sovereigns here, with only God above us, not the state above us, because whoever you put above you is God. And we've now made the state God, and it's now acting like God, and it's now saying it's God. And Chris Rock is saying Obama is our father. No, El Jefe is not my father, okay? Okay, my physical father is David Jones, but my spiritual father is Jesus Christ. What do you say to that?
Well, what you're saying is absolutely correct, but we're going through the same thing that Daniel went through with Nebuchadnezzar, that the three Hebrew children went through, that the pastors went through with Hitler. And let me read it to you. Let me show you what I'm talking about. In 1998, under the Clinton administration, this has all been documented. In all of the alphabet soup agencies, including the CIA, the FBI, the IRS, under the Janet Reno Justice Department, came together in the White House, and the not-for-profit division of the IRS that controls 750,000 churches in America. And their purpose of the meeting was to devise a plan classified as top secret called Operation D, and to devise a plan to control all uncooperative churches in America. Incredible. To put together a plan. And they said that their plan was a five-pronged plan. It included the financial power of the IRS, international pressures using the treaty powers of the UN, the investigative and intelligence forces of the FBI, CIA, and NSA, the judicial and prosecutorial assets of the U.S. Justice Department and federal courts, and congressional legislations. Now, they used all five of these against our church to bring us down. Our church was the first church that they used to bring pressure and to muscle us down. Our first church. This is pure authoritarianism. When reporters get detained in China, it's national news. But then we get arrested trying to do interviews or trying to hand out literature now or get tickets. I mean, we have become an authoritarian state. Now, prior to this, TCAN in Texas, and I'm not going into this in great detail, but prior to this, an organization called TCAN in Texas went through thousands and thousands and thousands of United Nations documents and came to the conclusion that the goal of the United Nations is to eliminate every local church on earth. To eliminate every local church on earth. Now that's what this whole issue of Islam is about right now. They're using Islam now to destroy Christianity, and then they'll turn around after they get through with that. then they will destroy Islam. But right now they're using Islam to destroy Christianity.
Exactly. Notice how they can't have Legos of Jabba the Hutt saying it's anti-Islam, has nothing to do with Islam. They're using it as political correctness to bring in and say you can't criticize Islam out of the Bible, or you can't criticize homosexuality, or you can't, because that violates hate speech, to shut down and bring in one world religion that the UN openly is calling for. Pastor Dixon, stay there. Pastor Baldwin, I'm going to get your take on this when we come back, and everybody get the book Romans 13 at InfoWarsStore.com. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be honest with you. When I learn about how they're persecuting Christians or anybody, I take it personal. I feel it. And it's not because I'm some goody two-shoes, bleeding heart person. I have empathy. God gave us that. And I've just noticed that most people that don't believe in God, and certainly state has used religion. Religion's been used for great mass murder. I don't deny that. But look at the communists, the greatest mass murderers in history. They're anti-Christian, and Christians having to literally run to the hills. They just recently found families, living out multi-generation Christians from Ukraine who had gone hundreds of miles into the mountains in Siberia to survive. And this is the type of world we're talking about. And I think about my listeners, the family, the Haken family, where they claim they were at a Tea Party event, they raided their hotel room and found a small amount of marijuana. They're both engineers. He's an Air Force veteran. Probably isn't even true. I mean, because I grew up in Dallas where the cops would plant drugs on people and witnessed it. And I'm not saying all police are bad, but the state is bad. Those directing the state from on top are bad. And I got physically, it was beyond hatred, beyond anger. It's more of a sorrow, but just sick of it. Like, why are we so weak? Why have we let the evil get so bad? And it was the realization last night that it's going to get so much worse, folks, because people think by giving into evil that somehow it makes everything okay. No. It sinks to the bottom. And I wanted to ask Pastor Baldwin, before we go back to Pastor Greg Dixon here, of ChuckBaldwinLive.com. You can go to the BiblicalLawCenter.com for Pastor Dixon's excellent site. And everybody needs to direct their pastors and preachers to this, because I'm not even judging people that are 501c3 and don't really know or they don't really understand. You need to go convict them. You need to give the book Romans 13 to them. You need to send them to the Bible Law Center, because it was our churches that led the war against King George, and it's going to be the churches that lead in the forced inoculation, the gun confiscation. I can play newscast where they say, we are training for gun confiscation, forced inoculation, and to tell the families to go to the FEMA Center. It's of the Lord, Romans 13, do what you're told. I mean, I've played that clip probably 100 times. Just type in Clergy Response Team into YouTube, you'll get the newscast. 4 years after we broke it, okay? It's so creepy that they've been training the preachers to tell their flocks, just like in Red Dawn, they use the mayor and the preacher when the Soviets take over to go, I mean, this is classic, right out of an authoritarian novel. That's what I'm getting at. People've got to wake up. What do you call waking up or being in denial? Because the people are given a great delusion. I mean, the Bible talks about they were given great delusion. You've got to be in a flaming delusion to not see that evil is just going hog wild and that it's going to persecute good people. Even if you go along with the New World Order, but secretly love God and you have a good heart, they're coming after you. That's what I'm seeing. The system releases criminals, pays Al-Qaeda to murder Christian communities in Syria. I mean, the system hates good people, and not all departments are like this, but you can see, like the Bible says, certain cities get taken over by evil. You can see the evil cities versus the ones that aren't fully taken over, but the body snatcher operation is ongoing in every town now. Evil is on the offense right now, and I want to ask, who will, lift up a standard, the Spirit of the Lord to lift up a standard when the enemy comes in like a flood, Pastor?
Yeah, absolutely. And the only ones to do that are the pastors. They are the key. Back in 1775 and 76, if it were not for the colonial pastors, the so-called Black Robe Regiment, there would have been no Bunker Hill, there would have been no Lexington Green, there would have been no Concord Bridge, no Declaration of Independence, no Constitution, there would have been no United States of America. It was the pastors of colonial America that literally led the war for independence. They preached, they taught, they exemplified. Many of them participated.
And the enemy knows that. That's why they're going after him today.
Absolutely. That's why they're neutered. And that was such a stroke of diabolical genius back in the 1950s when Lyndon Johnson created the 501c3 tax-exempt status. It really was. From a diabolical point of view, it was a stroke of genius. Because what it did, it allowed the government to control the churches and the preaching, especially the preaching of the churches via the threat of the loss of tax-exempt status with the IRS codes 501c3. So what's happened since, and coupled with the Romans 13 misinterpretation, obey the government no matter what you have is a double whammy against the pastors and churches. And the result is what we have today, a neutered, silent, scared, pitiful, pathetic pulpit. Until the pastors begin to awaken, energize their congregations. And
have you heard churches all over the place are being told, pull the crosses out? I mean, pretty soon there'll be nothing.
I've heard of that, and I keep hearing more and more of this type of activity taking place, and you got to ask yourself, where's it going to stop? And the fact is, it's never going to stop. But these churches have been indoctrinated also in the universities and the Christian colleges and the seminaries. It's all about success, Alex. It's about money. It's about 401k retirement. It's about insurance plans. It's about getting ahead. It's about using the current church.
Well, they could just turn the church into a swingers club then. Maybe that get more people in the door.
Well, unfortunately, there's probably too much of that going on too. But the fact is that what they've done is that they've created this social organization that is success oriented. It's all about climbing the ladder, just like a businessman who wants to further his business.
Absolutely. I'm going to bring you back in a moment to talk about the Second Amendment issue with Pastor Dixon. But let's get Pastor Dixon's take on this. How do we reverse this? These points I've made. The persecution of good people is accelerating.
But not only that, many of these men, even fundamentalist men, are sincere in believing that soul winning is the most important thing. Therefore, they are justified in taking these not-for-profit gifts. They are justified in compromising, so to speak, as long as they're winning souls. And we've got to somehow break through this malaise. Somehow we have to break through. See, for instance, the preachers are saying, well, they're not telling me what to preach. Well, that's like saying, well, they're not telling me not to speed. Well, you drive down the highway and you see a speed limit sign and it says 50 miles an hour speed limit. Well, just because a policeman doesn't come to you personally and say you're not to speed, that doesn't mean you're not supposed to speed. Well, just because the head of the IRS, the not-for-profit division of the IRS, doesn't come to you and say personally to you, or you don't get a letter from them saying you're not to espouse federal public policy, or that you're not supposed to endorse candidates or specific legislation, doesn't mean that you're not supposed to do those things. You can read the contract. You can read what the law says. Now, for instance...
That's right. You've signed a covenant, so don't cop out and say you haven't. And look what's happened to the churches. And look at how selectively all the pro-abortion, all the anti-gun churches, they can say who to vote for. But if you get a constitutional church out there saying something, here comes the IRS. What's the IRS doing in a church? The answer is you're not a church now. You are a government corporation.
That's exactly correct. Now, let me show you. The IRS keep every single preacher in America who speaks out on any public policy issue, and it gets in the newspapers, it gets on television or radio. The IRS is keeping a file on that preacher, the date that they gave that speech or the sermon, whether it was on the internet or wherever it was. Let me give you an example.
That's church police.
That's absolutely correct. They kept a secret file on me that went clear back to 1971. I'm just going to give you a few of the headlines that was out of the Indianapolis Star. 1971, Baptist High School to stress Bible. 1978, Reverend Dixon fights daycare license. 1978, church plans tech school. 1981, pornography target of downtown rally attended by 1,000. 1983, Reverend Dixon opposes lottery bill. 1983, churches to fight encroachment. 1985, state laws may collide with church. 1986, group to obey Jesus, not government. 1987, Dixon opposes Governor Orr on schools.
And they're putting this in the newspaper because it's as if it's a list of your crimes. Oh my gosh, a church went down and rallied against pornography. They're not allowed to do that. I mean, what country is this?
What's the world coming to? A church against pornography? Now listen to this one. How many churches, how many preachers, Chuck, have you heard say, well, but when they tell me I can't preach against homosexuality, I'll do something. Listen to this one. Gays urge panel to include them in anti-bias bill. But guess what? Old Big Mouth was there. It was opposed by Reverend Greg Dixon, 1990. That was the headlines in the Indianapolis Star. Now, this was just a few of them. I'm not going to take time on the broadcast today to read all of them. This was in. We got this through discovery. This was in our file. We got it through discovery. They'd kept a secret file on me since 1971. You think they don't have a file on Chuck Baldwin? You don't think they have a file on Jeffers, First Baptist Church in Dallas? You don't think they have a file on every preacher in America that's speaking out on these public policy issues?
This is, listen, fusion centers, that term comes directly out of East Germany. When I first heard this, 12 years ago, I didn't believe it. And I looked up the federal purchase orders. They hired Marcus Wolf for 3 years to set up Homeland Security, the former head of the Stasi. This is directly out of East Germany. They actually set up what we're now seeing launch in America.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you can say all you want to about, well, we're going to get some attorney to help us. We're going to get some attorney to fight for us. These attorneys will run, and they'll have their tail between their legs because in the first place, the minute you get into court, they're going to say, you signed the contract. You signed the contract. Isn't
that the problem in America is that, I mean, I don't think of myself as a tough guy or something, but I have no fear of them coming after me, what may be in the newspaper. They may set me up. I just have peace other than wanting to resist them. I don't have peace there. What happened to the spirit in America? Because I'm a pretty wicked devil, and I absolutely in my heart want to resist these people in my soul. Where are the men today? Where are the people? I mean, they don't even hardly protest abortion anymore in this country. Where is it? I guess we're just going down.
That's one of the reasons that, see, when we were, the Bible says rebellion is worse than witchcraft. When our church was a corporation, a 501c3 not-for-profit corporation, we obeyed all the laws. We withheld taxes. We did everything. We dotted every I. We crossed every T. We did everything. But when we unincorporated, when we got out of the system, when we were no longer a 501c3, we said no more. We didn't do any of those things. We stopped being a tax collector for the government. We stopped paying collecting federal income tax, and our position was that these people are not employees; they're ministers.
Well, they spin it like it's demonic to resist a corrupt government, but I mean, resisting is one thing. I mean, obviously, rebelling against God is super evil, but they call churches rebellious that don't submit to the government. What do you say to that Romans 13 issue?
Well, in the first place, if you've signed the contract, you better obey the contract. But that's what the Biblical Law Center does. we help churches to organize and reorganize so they can be free from 501c3.
And they're doing that successfully by the thousands.
So, well, I'm not saying they're doing it by the thousands.
No, there are a lot of churches starting and a lot of ones that are, I mean, I got friends right out here that go to churches that have been around for decades that aren't 501c3.
I know, but there's more to it than just, I mean, there's, you've got to, that's why the Biblical Law Center is trying to, it's more to it than just, I'm telling you, there's more to it. And that's
well, listen, we'll get you on for a full hour sometime just to get into the law aspects. I know you've been through it yourself. You're the experts on it, but I wanted to get Chuck Baldwin's take here on the state of the Second Amendment and then get your take, Pastor Dixon. I mean, now the churches, well, let me ask Dixon briefly. What do you make of the first, you know, the Southern Baptist and all the rest of them coming out and saying, basically, turn in your guns to the government?
Well, in the first place, we're seeing now a specific line between fundamentalists and evangelicals, and we've been trying to tell them that all along. There's a difference between fundamentalists and evangelicals. And so these wimpy evangelicals now are wimping out. And so so we're seeing it now. And so the evangelicals, they want to be seen as these nice guys and go along guys and to get along guys. And so they're saying, well, we can give in and we can give in on the, and they're doing the same thing on the immigration. They're saying, well, I was a stranger and we took them in. Well, I appreciate that verse, but it doesn't mean that you have to take some wicked people into your home and turn your children over to some predator just because the Bible says, I saw a stranger and we took them in. It doesn't mean that
Well, the point is it's globalism, it's pure UN, ecumenical takedown of America, and it's all moving now. And it should be an alarm bell. If your church is telling you you shouldn't own guns, ask why the government has guns. We're supposed to be the government. You say render unto Caesar. We are the government. The Bill of Rights is the government. That's what you follow. That's the biblical law, not the law of the satanic UN. Pastor Baldwin?
Yeah, it's thanks, Alex. This is an issue that I'm just really passionate about right now because I think this is the defining issue for the future liberty and freedom of our country. The semi-automatic rifle is the most efficient, the most effective self-defense tool in modern time. It is equivalent to the Roman sword of the first century. Jesus commanded the disciples to buy the Roman sword and to possess the Roman sword. I would remind people that back in the Old Testament in Genesis 14, back before the law of Moses or anything of that nature, when Lot was taken by 5 heathen kings, he armed his servants, Abram, they went after them, they took them to the battlefield, they fought. He slaughtered the kings. He rescued Lot by the power of the sword. The ability to defend oneself is a fundamental natural law principle that is given by God, whether we're Christian or non-Christian, no matter what our denomination or lack thereof.
The right to self-defense is sacrosanct.
It is sacrosanct, absolutely, and it is given by God. And for preachers to acquiesce on this issue is absolutely, in my opinion, blasphemous against the laws of God. And unfortunately, Greg, I think you'd admit with me that there are many of our brethren in the fundamentalist ranks that have capitulated on this issue, just as evangelicals have.
Well, I haven't heard any of our unregistered church preachers.
Oh yeah, no, maybe not those guys. No, not those unregistered guys. I'm sure they haven't. But there's a lot of guys that would call themselves fundamentalists that teach this asinine interpretation of Romans 13, that no matter what the government declares, that you are to submit. And I've known some of these guys. I know some of these guys personally.
Well, I would say that I'd call them. I'm putting them over in the evangelical camp.
Well, listen, just to be clear here, across the board, guys, undoubtedly, what do you call this massive explosion of evil moving on all fronts, swarming us? What do you call that in history and biblically, what we're going into? A quickening, an acceleration?
Well, Jesus said that in the last days, many will fall away, and we're living in that day that many are falling away. This is the great falling away. That day will not come until there come a falling away first, and that's exactly what we're seeing.
Well, I think we're also seeing the age-old principle of self-promotion. The idea that I am going to get ahead, I'm going to be prospered, I'm not going to endanger myself, I'm not going to risk anything. I think that's innate in many people, that they don't want to risk, they don't want to endanger themselves.
Don't they know fortune favors the bold? And I mean, our fortune is liberty?
Yeah, no, they don't. They for so long they have been taught and indoctrinated in this principle of submission to government. This has been going on for nearly 100 years. I mean, you got to go back to the war between the states probably before you found preachers that were really talking about this. Since then, the preachers haven't been talking about this. Just the opposite, Alex. They've been talking about submit to the government. The government is good. The government is of God. Don't resist. Do what this has been indoctrinated in them for 150 years probably.
Well, look, I'm not on some high horse because I'm not a preacher and I'm not perfect, but I have a relationship, with God, and I love, innocent people, want to protect them. I don't know how you couldn't have burning in your bones to resist what's happening, and I don't know how these preachers can actually be saved Christians and sit there and promote all this evil. Pastor Dixon, what do you say to that?
Well, all I can say is that I'm not going to say that they're not saved, but I'm going to say they're sure deceived. And the Bible says deceived and being deceived. And I'll guarantee you they need to get back and take a new look at what the Scriptures teach. But I think it's just a total misunderstanding of the whole purpose of the Christian life. And the Bible says, resist the devil and he'll flee from you. And Paul the Apostle said, ye have not yet resisted unto blood. And we're to resist even unto blood. That's what Paul the Apostle said. And we're to resist with everything that is within us. And we've just become so soft. Everything is so soft.
Sure, the Bible doesn't say lick the devil's boots and he'll flee from you.
That's right. That's right. And everything everything is so soft today. We have such soft lives.
Soft men. Men are soft.
That's right. And we've become so feminized as men. And we're enjoying. We're at ease in Zion. That's what the Bible says. It says we're at ease in Zion. And the Scripture says that Ephraim turned back in the days of battle, and that's where we are.
I'm not at ease. I'm not at ease. I mean, I don't know how anybody can be at ease when pure evil's rising all around us. But
Alex, let's remember, too, that let's focus again on the importance of standing for the Second Amendment. I just can't stress this enough.
Oh, yeah, if they get that, they get everything.
We must draw our line in the sand on this issue. I mean, I have publicly said, and I've publicly written, you've read my stuff, and you see what I am willing to be a lawbreaker when they tell me that my semi-automatic rifle is against the law. I am willing to be a lawbreaker. I will not submit to that law. I will not register my rifles. I will not surrender my rifles.
That's why they hate Heston so much. He said, for my cold, dead hand. It's that not submitting, because they always want a little more, a little more. We said, no more. You will not pass.
That's why, again, I have to say, that's why Tim and I wrote the book, To Keep or Not to Keep, Why Christians Should Not Give Up Their Guns. If we do not take a stand as a church on the issue of the right to keep and bear arms and preach it from a biblical natural law perspective, and make people understand that they are morally justified, they are spiritually justified in violating any law that requires them to surrender their guns. If we don't take that stand and draw that line now, There is no liberty left in America. I cannot stress
that.
And
I want to state something. It's so immoral because we know they want the guns to enslave us. We know they're authoritarian. So you are aiding and abetting the enemy in what they're going to do. And that's why anyone that promotes it knowingly, like these police chiefs and stuff that know, they are active collaborators with the enemy. They are globalist operatives, and we know who runs the New World Order. They are agents of Satan. And that's not a verbal flourish. These people are agents consciously of the devil. Go ahead.
Well, yeah. I appreciate what you're saying, but what you have to understand is, and this may sound Pollyanna, but the First Amendment was written before the Second Amendment. And
no, I know they have the right. I'm saying they want our guns to devour us.
I appreciate what you're saying, but I want you to hear me for just a moment. We gave up the First Amendment. Now, we didn't, the church, the Bible says judgment must begin at the house of God.
That's right.
And the preachers gave up the First Amendment. And if we weren't willing to fight for the First Amendment, why do you think they're going to be willing to fight for the Second Amendment?
That's right.
I'm going to fight for the Second Amendment, and I know that a lot of others that are as well.
Tell what, 5 minutes of overdrive, gentlemen. Back in 60 seconds. I want you both to get a final word. Infowars.com, back Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. Central. 4 to 6 p.m. Central, Infowars.com. Look, I got in Piers Morgan's face. Made a lot of little people uncomfortable out there because they want to be in a trance, but it's now been seen as a seminal moment in television by many people. And it's because I simply got in his face and said, I know you're coming to take my guns to enslave me. Now it turns out the article's up at Infowars.com. We've got him coming on Sunday. The Veritas Project, they went to his house, and he's got armed security guards. Okay, so there you go. That is the individual at CNN, Piers Morgan. They want our guns consciously to enslave us. And you got the state rep out in Colorado who says, well, we got to ban 15-round mags because after you've used the mag, you throw it away. I mean, you know, there's also a lot of useful idiots in this. So, yeah, we shouldn't judge them all. I judge their actions. I don't judge them. I don't enjoy hating the New World Order. I hate what they're doing. I want to give Pastor Dixon 2 minutes to finish up, and then the last word to Pastor Chuck Baldwin, chuckbaldwinlive.com, biblicallawcenter.com for Greg Dixon. Greg, 2 minutes.
Well, I appreciate what Chuck said, and I'm not talking about him. I just want to reiterate what we were saying, that the preachers, I'm talking about the preachers, if they're not willing to take a stand on the First Amendment and fight for God and the right to preach the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ unfettered, free from government, why in the world do we think that they would be willing to fight for the Second Amendment? That's the point that I'm trying to make. And once again, I rejoice that there are still programs like this one, and we need to support Alex Jones, and we need to stand and give thanks to the Lord that we still have freedom of the press in this country, that we still have programs of this kind, conservative broadcast, conservative television. I trust that you go to our website, thebiblicallawcenter.com. I'd like for you to get my book, The Trail of Blood Revisited, How to Be Free, Getting Free from 501c3.
Yeah, we need to carry that book because I've read excerpts. I didn't have time to read the whole thing. I want to get you back on in the next month for a full hour on breaking the bonds of enslavement over the churches. We'll talk to you very soon. Thanks for all the time, Pastor Dixon.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Had the biggest church in the country and then found out about all this, did the right thing, and is now trying to bring the church out of bondage. And again, even if you don't believe in God, folks, when the government takes over the church, you're in trouble. Final comments, Chuck Baldwin, Pastor Baldwin.
Yeah, Alex, thanks a lot. And Greg's a great man, and I appreciate you having him on. Yeah, I just think it's absolutely critical that we, regardless of whether we call ourselves Christians or not, whether we go to church or not, that we understand the moral biblical principles that undergirding the Second Amendment, that the battle is being waged right now over the right to keep and bear arms. This is where the battle is raging. We must not capitulate, compromise, or surrender this issue. If we do, there is no more freedom of any kind left in the United States. And a lot of times I'm finding that many unsaved, unchurched people are more willing to stand for the Second Amendment than many of my Christian brethren. And I find that really disconcerting.
It's because they've got instincts, they've got gut, and they're good people who probably deep down love God.
Absolutely right. God-fearing people. I hear in our fellowship in the Flathead Valley of Montana, Liberty Fellowship that I started a couple of years ago. We have people of all types that come to our fellowship. Some don't even profess to be Christian, but they appreciate the biblically based principles of liberty that we preach every Sunday afternoon from our pulpit that's live streamed at libertyfellowshipmontana.com. So I'm finding people of all kinds and all shapes and sizes that are willing to stand, and I'm very encouraged by that. What I'm not encouraged about is people like Franklin Graham and Richard Land and so many of these other preachers across America that are not willing to stand up in their pulpits for the Second Amendment. So I encourage people, if they're attending a church where the pastor is not standing up for the Second Amendment...
Speak out. Thank you, Pastor.
Introducing Pro One.
know they're doing all this. I know they're bad. I know they plan to bring in global crises to sell total tyranny and the shutdown of the alternative media as the answer. And the shutdown of the old web with the new controlled internet. It's all being announced. It's all happening. They're going to take your pension funds, all of it. All of it. You can have no independence. All of your pension fund, public or private, will be taken. All of your bank accounts will be taken. And then your life will be taken. How do I know that? That's how tyrannies work. If they can get any of it, they're going to get it all. What did I say 3 weeks ago when the Cyprus thing started? I said, if they can get 10%, people are like, how dare you say that? They're not taking any money. You know, that was the first response. It couldn't be true. I was reporting on Foreign Press. First few days, you're a liar, Alex. On my own website, Infowars.com, the comments of trolls and spammers. Alex, you're making it up. Okay, they are taking the money, 7.5%. It's not 10%, you dirty liar. Because they were covering articles from days before. It was then 10%, then it was 20, then it was 30, then it was 40, then it was 50, then it was 60, then it was 70, then it was 80, then it was 90, then it was all the money out of your bank account. For many of the people that had accounts, the lowest number was 40% out of your bank account. And now they're saying they're going to take more. And you notice at first they were like, yeah, tough bailout for Cyprus, but it's what it needs. Fox News reporting. You know, I'm Shepard Smith or whatever his name is. That's right. And then a few days later, now they call it a bailout. They don't even say money out of the accounts on CNN, Fox, MSNBC. That's how it works, you see. And now it's a conspiracy theory. They didn't take money out in Cyprus. There's not 2 billion bullets. And, of course, then it turned out that they sold it as we're going to get the rich people's money when it was actually the poor people. Turns out hundreds and hundreds of mega rich that had their money there, all their money was taken out in the weeks and months before. Reuters reported, oh, but I forgot it doesn't exist. I mean, this is the crazy land that we've gotten to. So they're now loading missiles onto the launchers. All embassies told to evacuate staff from North Korea. The British are pulling out. That is the type of information that is unfolding right now. And maybe this is like all the last threats. You know, remember Homeland Security about a month and a half ago? They were talking about cutting Homeland Security's ever-growing budget just to cut the growth of it. Just hundreds of billions of dollars a year conservatively. They said, we're just going to cut a few billion of your growth. And they said, okay, terrorists will hit us. Al-Qaeda working with the Tea Party. It is your PrisonPlanet.tv memberships that fund so much of what we do here on this operation. And then we're more than happy for the TV show after it's aired live, then be leaked out onto the web to tens of millions of people. That's our goal. Ladies and gentlemen, we are live. It is Friday, the 5th day already, hard to believe, of April 2013, and we are going to be live here for the next 3 hours. I've got Chuck Baldwin, a former Constitution Party candidate, joining us coming up at the bottom of the next hour to get into the Southern Baptist Convention, the official Vatican newspapers here in the United States, you name it, calling for an abolition of the Second Amendment. Absolutely state-run, government-controlled religious groups in this country. Truly despicable. And if so-called Christians put up with this, next they won't just be saying abortion's good, they'll be saying human sacrifice is good. And I'm not joking when I say that. I see an Associated Press headline, they're restricting the use of the term Islamicist. Can't even call al-Qaeda terrorists now because they're the good guys overthrowing Libya and Syria, and now you can call anybody that wants liberty a right-wing extremist or a constitutionalist and extremist. That's the new bad group officially. And I'm going to be getting more into this case of this family who are our listeners. We've confirmed it in Florida. All over the news, kidnapped children, government extremists, anti-government extremists, kidnapped children, yes, their own children. They claim they took their children, their two little boys, because they found a small amount of marijuana. The government's going to take your children for a small amount of marijuana, and they hadn't gotten them back over a year later. That is a predatory government that publicly grows the opium and loads it on the C-130s in Afghanistan to fly heroin into America, onto the streets and into your sons' and daughters' veins. This is a totally sickening joke. But again, everybody knows the government deals drugs. They have congressional hearings admitting it. And then they have two launchers. And they're talking about nuclear war by next Wednesday. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, they're talking about nuclear war. We're not talking about nuclear war. The establishment is. 2 medium-range missiles have been loaded onto mobile launchers in North Korea and are ready to be launched, South Korea's semi-official Yonhap news agency reported today, citing military sources in Seoul. By the way, we have a correspondent in Seoul, South Korea, and we're working on that right now. A U.S. official, not a servant, but official with direct knowledge of the information told CNN on Thursday that missiles and launch components have been moved to the east coast of North Korea in the last few days. And again, that would be able to target the west coast of the United States or be able to obviously hit Japan. That's much closer. In response, South Korea has sent Aegis destroyers equipped with advanced radar systems into both its coast, Yonhap said, citing Navy sources. The apparent deployment comes amid further threatening statements by North Korea and heightening tensions in the region, a situation that does not need to get any hotter, U.S. State Department said. Why did the State Department authorize with the UN then in the mid-90s, ABB, the nuclear reactor company, the multinational company, headed by Donald Rumsfeld, to transfer the reactors to him to get the fissile material to make the atomic bomb warheads, the primitive warheads, the 1950s science-level warheads. Why was that dumb? And there were reactors they could have been, quote, given the last time they were holding the world hostage. Oh, you're threatening war with the South with conventional weapons. Here, let us give you reactors to make A-bombs. I guarantee you, when we're in some new giant wars with al-Qaeda that's being given the entire Middle East right now, a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, it will be a conspiracy theory that the West put al-Qaeda in those countries. It'll be, how dare Alex Jones claim al-Qaeda was put in by us? And I'll be like, I have LA Times, Associated Press, Reuters, CFR from 2010, 11, and 12, 13. Here they, shut up, traitor. Shut up, traitor. Yeah, there's London Guardian dealing with the... Let's talking about in 2000, him transferring stuff to him. He was doing it in 1995, 96. Anyways, it's just having a memory in a culture of people that don't even know which end is up It's really weird. I mean, I guess I'm a heretic because I know sodium fluoride in the levels they put it in the water and food are increasing cancer. They admit it. I know they're putting bisphenol A in the plastics, in that type of plastic to reduce fertility. The White House science czar brags about it. John P. Holdren. I mean, I know, remember that was the headline, is going to hit America. And if anybody could think they'd go, the Tea Party's made up of mainly Islamophobes who gave up all their rights believing they were going to fight al-Qaeda. Now the government publicly runs al-Qaeda, so they're flipping it over to the Patriot movement is the terrorist. But they came out and said, well, who's going to hit us? Right-wingers working with al-Qaeda. Haven't you seen all the new dramas on ABC, CBS, and Fox and Spike TV and everywhere else? I mean, on all the shows, the killers are gun owner patriots. Haven't you seen the medical shows? And then the cops are out there, and there's a Tea Party event in Louisiana, and people are visiting from Florida, a husband and wife who are engineers who have 2 little boys, so they raid the rooms of the people because it's an anti-government thing. You're not allowed to have a Tea Party event at the hotel with speakers. You know, good agents, good maids went in and dug through stuff, in the free country and claimed they found less than a gram of marijuana and a pipe. And so the children were taken, thank God, in our free country. If they catch you with marijuana, your children are taken, Air Force veterans, no criminal record. And then a year later, the government has the kids. And then now the parents went and took their kids back. Oh, my gosh, can you imagine? There's only one thing worse than that. One time I went in the garage, and usually if I left the door open and forget to close it at night, raccoons go in to try to find the dog food. And the most evil thing that you've ever seen happens. If there's a mama raccoon or daddy raccoon in the garage, they're not mean about it. They'll just kind of run out. But if they brought their babies in with them and you try to get close, they just get their back against the wall. They won't leave, and they start hissing and growling at you. And if you go up to them, they will attack you and bite you. And I think all raccoons should be executed, hunted down, and put in FEMA camps, because there's nothing worse than wanting your babies to be safe. There's nothing worse than a parent wanting to be with their child. I mean, I think abortion is great in this country. I think it's great we've killed 53 million babies. I think it's great now the Journal of Bioethics is calling to kill babies up to age 3. I think it's great they're calling for death panels of old people. And I think it's great that all over the country, I know people. I'll be in a restaurant listening, or I was at Barton Springs once and heard a couple going, it's just terrible. Yeah, I can't believe it. I mean, no criminal record. He's a professor. She's a scientist. She went in to have her second child. They claim they found marijuana in her system. They took both their kids. Yeah, it's been 2 months. They hadn't seen them, and they're ending parental rights. Yeah, it's terrible. And then I'm in a rest, and I start talking to the people, or I'm in a public policy poll going, do you believe the conspiracy theory, the government's involved in drugs? I mean, they've busted. I've had Serpico on. He said everyone in the narcotics division of the detectives, everyone but him was dealing drugs. Everyone. And he wouldn't do it, so they shot him in the face. Frank Serpico. I grew up and the police dealt the drugs. And I didn't use them. I tried 1 or 2 and hated the way it made me feel. Like, I feel terrible when I'm on this. The next day I feel like I was run over by a truck. No, thank you. And I'd say, what are you doing raiding our party saying you're looking for drugs? You sell drugs. Oh, did I go to jail or did I go to jail? And I mean, I'm just calling all the bull. I'm done. I'm calling it all. I'm done. I mean, I physically didn't even get angry yesterday. I got physically ill yesterday watching all the newscasts, just talking trash about 2 parents that had the will and the courage to get their kids back from an evil government. I mean, if you saved somebody from a Nazi death camp, you better believe it was on the radio that terrorists had stolen, a prisoner. I mean, if aliens sat down in flying saucers and said, anyone that doesn't help us are terrorists, I guarantee you, your neighbors, if you were against the aliens, would rat you out to them. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. I'd say half the public If blood-drinking aliens landed and said, give us children to stick a straw in and drink their blood, and we won't kill you, your neighbors would come grab your children and deliver them, bowing to the aliens. Oh, great bobble snap. Here is the child, drink their blood. I mean, I'm serious. I'm serious. These are collaborator enemies. And just we need to call them out for what they are, break the trance, and realize we got tyranny running wild, and now it wants to shut down the real media. The latest on North Korea, it's all coming up. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this 5th day of April 2013. It is Friday, and coming up in the second half of the broadcast, Pastor Chuck Baldwin is going to be joining us to discuss all the major denominations, from Catholic to the Southern Baptist Convention, calling for the end of the Second Amendment and basically the end of America. This is the great move ahead of the new global wars they're about to start, the implosion of the world economy and every nationally sovereign state, and the ushering in of the one world government. And the churches all lining up, again, to worship abortion, to worship gun control, to worship the end of marriage, to just worship tyranny, period, and to openly call for world government, as the Vatican is now doing. Here is the CNN headline report. North Korea loads missiles on